Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.
Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. So I will cover housekeeping first and then we'll move through the agenda. So I'd advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I would advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. And I would remind everyone that it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. Okay, item 1 on the agenda is apologies. I have apologies from the Deputy Chair, Pat Sheehan, and also from Gary Middleton. Any other apologies? No. So item 2 on the agenda is Chairperson's business, and I just wanted to highlight this as it has been covered in the media today, and it's a very significant intervention in the education system. We have the National Association of Head Teachers formally notifying the department that they are entering into formal dispute with them. So clearly a very concerning development in the system, but it is clear from their statement that school leaders are expressing a feeling of really being pushed beyond their limit at the moment in terms of capacity to carry out the rules. And we know there have long been concerns about the pace of change in the system, and I think that's important to note. That has been something that has been highlighted by the NAHT, that it is the amount of change but also the pace of change in terms of new initiatives that is driving some of the intense workload pressures. They also have highlighted issues around access to support for children with special educational needs. Obviously, we'll be covering some of that today, and also some of the chronic budgetary issues and maintenance problems in school buildings. So, look, it seems to me that it is clear there's a need to perhaps pause and to stabilise the system rather than to overload it any further. And I would imagine everybody around the table, from whatever political perspective, would be of the view that we don't want to see a fundamental breakdown in industrial relations. We would like to see the system continuing to be able to move forward. So I would like to make a proposal. I'm very happy for other members to speak to it, that we do just respond to this quickly, that we write to the Minister and we urge him to engage urgently in good faith with the NAHT to try and address these issues as quickly as possible. And also, I think, to request that the committee receive regular and timely updates on how that process is rolling out. So happy to open it up for comment, or if there's any other suggestions of actions. Cathy, you don't want to come?
Yeah, Chair, look, this is extremely concerning, but I think the reality is that, you know, we've all been talking to school leaders, we've all been talking to teachers, we've seen Sankos in front of us, and we probably aren't as surprised that this has been coming down the line. And to me, this shows that we have a minister who's very out of step, and seems to be unaware of the struggles that our schools are facing, and our school leaders, and this really does need to be a wake-up call for him. I 100% agree with your proposal that we need to make contact with him, and he needs to deal with this urgently. You know, rather than realising the struggles that there are with SEN and trying to address those and, you know, take stock of everything that's happening, we have a minister who's driving forward his Transform Ed agenda, and nobody is denying that there needs to be reform in the system and reform with the curriculum and all of that, but it's the scale and the pace and the lack of information that is what I'm picking up from our school leaders. So we've already heard from pupils and parents and classroom assistants and Sankos that they don't feel that the minister's listening to them, and I think this is another just angle of this. So happy to agree with your proposal, and something needs to be done urgently in this.
Okay, so I agree with everything that you've said there, and I do think perhaps that there's been maybe a lack of awareness in the public sphere outside of the education system, just how much change is coming through in terms of reform of actually what is going to be delivered in the classroom, and I think school leaders are just clearly feeling the brunt of that. So it looks like we have agreement to get that correspondence away. I think it's absolutely essential that committee is kept up to date with how that engagement with NAHT now does pan out. Okay, so that takes us on to item number 3, which is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations for any items on the agenda today? No. Again, as usual, if that should arise, please indicate so that can be noted. Item 4 on the agenda is matters arising, of which there are none, unless anyone wants to introduce anything.
Yeah, Chair, I know we are going to have a dedicated session on youth services, but correspondence over the last number of days and coming from last week throughout the sector, particularly the community and voluntary sector, is that growing unease and a lot of fear for jobs, but also more importantly our young people at the very core in front of this uncertainty that's being created. In my personal opinion, and just listening to youth workers on the ground, they certainly can see through this as well. This feels like a very politically motivated approach to this, to almost pit the sectors against each other, and it's going to cause a workforce crisis, and our youth services right now don't know if they're going to be funded or even valued going forward, and it is a bizarre situation which I really am disappointed in the department and the minister. It feels like to me they're completely detached from the ground here on what they're doing, and it's avoidable. This is for me, it's very politically motivated around the 3-year budget and that one day great, and they're using our frontline services as a way to enhance their negotiation tactic, which is very disappointing.
Well, I think all members have received the correspondence that came through from the Youth Work Alliance, and it would be my anticipation that will be tabled as an item of correspondence for next week's committee. We also have correspondence that we are expecting back. I assume there's been nothing further from the EA or the department in the queries we've raised in relation to youth services previously.
In terms of the forward work plan, the
yeah.
department are happy to swap the 16 to 18 legislation briefing from the 18th of March, so we could have a joint panel from DE and EA on that date.
Okay. Well, that's
and
welcome
then
that that's now
together then.
now confirmed, because I think we do need to hear directly. There's only so far I think written correspondence will get us. So look, I share a lot of the concerns, and I think that we have a crisis emerging. Both statutory and non-statutory youth services seem to be reaching a little bit of a crisis point here, and I think we need to be hearing from both EA and the department on that basis. So are we content to await the response to our correspondence, to take that oral briefing, but to obviously note those concerns? We all agreed? Great. Item 5 on the agenda there is draft minutes. So I'd refer members to the draft minutes of the committee meeting of the 11th of February 26 at page 8, and I would like to seek agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, item 6 then on the agenda, so happy for the witnesses to come forward. So we're joined today by the Children's Commissioner, Chris Quinn, and also Rachel Hogan from the Children's Law Centre, and also we have parent advocate Deirdre Shakespeare joining us, and they're going to be providing an oral briefing in relation to issues related to restrictive practice in schools. So there is a briefing from the clerk at page 16, some papers provided by the Children's Commissioner and Children's Law Centre, pages 18 to 116 of your packs. So I think I've covered introductions. You're all very welcome, as always, to committee, but I would just like to specifically welcome Deirdre. You've briefed committee informally, and I know you've engaged extensively with members across the committee, and have shared your experiences and Harry's experiences. And really, I would like to just put on record at the outset that it's a lot of your work and your lobbying that has brought this issue of restricted practice onto the agenda and kept it on the agenda. So I think you deserve a huge amount of credit, and we are very pleased to be hearing from you today at committee, because you're putting yourself in the front line as a parent to advocate so publicly is not an easy thing to do, and we know that even coming here today to present evidence on this is not an easy thing to do, so it is appreciated. Okay, so I think at this stage I'll hand over for any initial remarks or presentation that anyone wishes to make. We could ask for up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into question and answer. So over to yourselves.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you today. We thought it would start with Deirdre, since she started this campaign in bringing to light what happened to her son Harry. So I'm just going to pass straight to you, Deirdre. That's okay.
Thank you. Hello, Chairperson and members of the committee. I want to thank you for inviting us to speak to you today. So my name is Deirdre Shakespeare, and I co-founded Harry's Law in 2019 with Adele Elliott. We garnered a lot of support with cross-party recognition of this issue within the Assembly, and for the first time the harm caused by restrictive practices was publicly acknowledged and children's rights entered the conversation. A review was undertaken by the Department of Education, and they released a draft consultation, and they continue to work on drafting guidance. We also heard calls for legislative reform from organisations such as the Children's Law Centre, Northern Ireland, brain's going blank, Nikki, RCN and Basel, to name a few. Disappointingly, many of the reforms we expected have not yet materialised, and our children are still waiting. Guidance alone will never be enough if the legal bias remains the same. The concept of maintenance and discipline risks repeating the failures of the past. Harry's Law began when we discovered that our 5-year-old son was restrained and segregated on a daily basis. And this wasn't to prevent immediate harm. It wasn't an emergency, and it wasn't a last resort. This was normalised practice, forcing him to sit, to play, to complete tasks and schoolwork. Non-speaking children rely on adults to protect them, but when Harry tried to show staff that he didn't want to sit, they tied his feet down to the chair and they forced him to sit. Seclusion was another form of restrictive practices, and this meant being placed in a small cupboard in the classroom called the dark room. Harry is a non-speaking child with an intellectual disability, and he is also CVI. He couldn't verbally tell anyone what happened to him. He couldn't report the daily harm, but sharing Harry's experience became a catalyst that exposed something that many other families knew, and it was happening quietly, routinely, and without any oversight. Promises were made by the Department of Education in March 2022, which raised the expectations not just for us parents but also for children. The policies would be brought into line with human rights standards, but I remain extremely concerned that the department risks repeating the very failures that led to Harry's experience because the core problem remains in place. The legal power to use force for the purpose of maintaining good order and discipline has not been repealed, and this wording is outdated and is dangerous. The Department of Health's regional policy is underpinned with 3 steps to positive practice, which is a human rights-based framework. A framework which requires an adult first to understand the child and their needs, and then act in the least restrictive way by placing the best interests of the child at fore. Plan and act positively, and then finally review and improve. This is fundamentally different from a framework that is built on discipline, where force is justified to maintain good order and compliance. With a discipline-based system, control always comes first, and harm is only recognised when something goes wrong. But a human rights-based framework is anticipated and prevented. This is extremely important, especially for children with disabilities and particularly for children who cannot speak for themselves. Underpinning new guidance as an operational document on reasonable force is the very same law that allowed our son to be restrained in the first place. A law based on discipline, not on human rights and safeguarding. Everyday restrictions that occurred with Harry fell outside scrutiny, and the harm became invisible because strapping him into a chair was viewed as behaviour management rather than a restrictive intervention. And the sad reality is, children are experiencing daily restraints without them even being recognised as restraint because it's so normalised. So I'm here today to ask you to finish what families have started. Repeal the power that allows force for good order and discipline, put children's rights into law, not just policy, and make sure that no parent ever has to discover the way, the harm that Harry did by showing me that whenever he had to point to a photograph, that he was restrained. Harry's distress, it's not temporary, and he still lives with the impact of what happened to him. He has panic attacks, night terrors, hyperventilating every day. He has crippling anxiety, and he still has fear of his feet being touched. It's a constant reminder of what was done to him. No family should ever have to knock on door after door. School, education, health, police, safeguarding, and to be honest, that became another form of harm. We experienced intimidation and humiliation, where the power imbalance was very clear. The challenging restraint meant challenging the system itself, and that was a really frightening task. So I'm asking this committee to understand something very clearly. What happened to Harry didn't happen because guidance was unclear. It happened because the law allowed it. And unless the law is changed, this will continue to happen over and over again. Guidance is meant to be about setting boundaries, what is acceptable, what is not. It should never be about comfort or pleasing anyone. It must be about prevention of harm, because that is not an option. Children's rights are not optional. Thank you.
Deirdre. Thank you. Any of the other panel members going to make any opening remarks?
Just very briefly, we felt it was important to put Harry's voice at the centre of this discussion today, and I want to thank you, Deirdre, for showing that bravery and sharing a very personal experience. I think it's important to put on the record that there are many parents and children like you and Harry, and also teachers and classroom assistants who are grappling with these issues on a day and daily basis. and it's a big task. We have a big task ahead of us, but as we'll discuss in a while, there are solutions in front of us. But the main thing was just to put on record our thanks to you, Deirdre, and we hope that Harry's voice can be heard and other young people like Harry in this inquiry today.
If I could just maybe add to that, obviously it took Deirdre coming out to talk in the open about what happened, and as she said, she approached everybody that she could think of looking for assistance and couldn't find a solution because there wasn't one. And then we all worked very hard along with the department and thought we'd got to a position where we were making really good progress and everyone had a shared understanding. And somewhere along the way that now has been completely lost, and that's why Deirdre is back here today, because she doesn't forget what happened, because she's still living with that every single day, as you can see. So we'd like to open the floor to any comments or questions.
Thank you, and again, just to emphasise our appreciation to Deirdre. We know these conversations are not always easy. Deirdre, can I start with a question for you? I think we all know the history of what you went through and the campaign that you fought and continue to fight. Would you be able to set out what provision looks like for Harry now, in terms of what has changed? Have there been positive changes in Harry's experience at school since you raised all of these issues?
Yeah, the change in Harry now is unrecognisable. He has been nurtured. He has been given so much support. I know that he's loved by his teacher, and I can say that hand on my heart because I know how he looks at her, that he loves her too. I've brought some things here with me today just to show you, for example. So if Harry gets frustrated, and it does happen, I'm not here to mislead anybody by saying that everything's rosy in the garden, because situations do arise sometimes. So Harry, sometimes when he gets frustrated, he will go to bite his hand, which is seen as self-harm. So the teachers will carry one of these, or the classroom assistants, they have a wee apron and they will carry one of these. And this is the first protocol. So they hand him this. It's very simple. And he will chew on this. And they will speak to him. And if you think about it, it's human first, really. He's a child after all. If you strip everything back, strip all the layers back, he's just a little boy with big emotions, and he doesn't know where to put them. So he uses this to regulate. So the adults in the room are helping him to regulate his emotions, to regulate himself. And these are just a few other things which are the same idea. He uses these to bite down on. And this is just to give him the time and the space for him to work it out himself, what is happening with his body. And I can't speak highly enough of his teacher and the staff in the room, because they've not only changed Harry's life, they have actually changed our lives, because we now can trust again, and we have a wee boy that we can send to school, and we know that he's safe and he's happy and he's loved and he's learning. The most important thing is seeing, on a weekly basis, we have an app which is an incredible resource to parents, because it opens the home to school communication pathway. And every Friday I look forward to CISA. So I'll get an email through, and there'll be a collection of videos in this CISA, and it'll be what has Harry got up to all week. Now, as many of you will know, Harry has no speech at all. He communicates through noises or pointing, and he has a communication aid. We're able to actively see his learning and his progression, how he's actually reading, how he recognises words. They have given him the world, is how I can put it to you. And it's just, I don't even think there's any words to describe how amazing his teacher is, and the staff who work with him. They do an amazing job. And I know it's not always easy, but I feel like I need to recognise, the work and the support that they have put in to try to help Harry. And it's just incredible to watch and unfold every year, the progress. and his communication, because prior Harry was strapped in a chair. He wasn't learning. You know, he was being forced to do things, and instead he was being traumatized, whereas now he's being taught how he can self-regulate. He is flourishing in an environment which is a very nurturing classroom. So yeah, feel very, very happy with how his education has turned around, and I feel it demonstrates just exactly how his education always should have been, you know.
Could I ask, just to follow on from that, and it's great to hear how Harry is doing. How can that be replicated and rolled out then as the standard approach across the system? What needs to change?
I'm going to let you take this now.
I think there's a real awareness and training issue here, which the department has recognised with quite a lot of advocacy from ourselves, but we think there should be a standardised mandatory training on this that's done regularly and is accredited. Because you could, for example, see situations where a classroom assistant who might have charge of the child and control over them sees a child going to bite themselves. Biting is quite a common behaviour in children who are non-verbal, and they need sensory feedback. So you might imagine a classroom assistant who wasn't trained might say, "Oh goodness," and put hands on Harry and hold his hands down and prevent him from, getting that sensory feedback. But if they knew that, that might be a restrictive practice, I recognise that holding somebody might be restrictive. What can I do that's least restrictive to, comply with human rights? What alternatives are there? And we have a visual representation here of the alternative would be to give him something that he can bite on, he can choose. He can bite on it without hurting himself until he can regulate himself or be co-regulated with an adult who understands his needs. And that seemed like a very simplistic example, and I know there's some very complicated scenarios going on, but training and awareness is important. And then you have to go back a step and say, well, what are you training on? And you have to be training on standard definitions of what is a restrictive practice. So we often talk about this as restraint and seclusion, and I don't like calling it that. We don't want to restrain and we don't want to seclude where we can possibly avoid any of these things. So we need to understand what is restrictive. When am I doing something that's restrictive? How do I plan for that? What alternatives are there? And really empowering our teachers, classroom assistants, it could be the school caretaker, anybody who has got charge or control of the child and has authority to manage them might have to deal with an incident or an issue. And with Harry, because his needs are known, and particularly the discussion with Deirdre as a parent, there's open communication, there's best interest decision making, there's a plan, there's probably review of that plan. If a problem arises, they speak together. Those sorts of things can be standardised through the guidance. And again, if you go back a step from that, you'd be saying, well, where does the guidance flow from? And you have to then look at the legal powers. And I think that the legal powers and the guidance that is already in place in relation to those, in relation to that power to restrain, there's already guidance on that. Power to use reasonable force. It's using the wrong language, it's coming from the wrong starting point. It's not a rights-based framework, but teachers and schools need another different framework that's based on human rights. But the training is a very important part of that, and teachers that we've spoken to, and I think we've all had the opportunity to speak to many school leaders and teachers and classroom assistants and other staff, they really are crying out for that support and help. They want to know. Nobody gets up and says, I want to go and do a restrictive practice today, or I want to do something wrong. They're also, some people are afraid because they have done things that they're worried. Now, did I cross the line? I didn't know what else to do. What else could I have done? And they would come to me and say, I'm worried about this. So we want to help. We want to work together as best as we can and come up with the right solutions. But unfortunately, we've reached a point where that has become stuck, and we'd very much like it to become unstuck.
Could I just make a very brief comment, just based on your first question? Harry's 14 now, isn't he? 14. And he was 5 when this happened to him, so that's almost a decade has passed. And I suppose for me it's really concerning that time has passed and it feels like we're no further forward. I think my predecessor, Kula Yasuma, when she published the Never Seen Nor Heard report, she did speak about being lost for words. I think that, I can't quote her verbatim, but she was saying that she was lost for words at the state of play. And I suppose, just to reinforce what others have already said, I visit lots of schools. as I'm sure you do yourselves. I talk with lots of classroom assistants and lots of teachers, and I think the big thing here is that they are, as Rachel has said, people are crying out for guidance. They're crying out for training. Lots of classroom assistants wouldn't even know that the guidance is a thing, or there is a draft. So there's a massive gap, and the impact is the children are missing out. And because Harry is disabled and non-verbal, he is getting treated differently than other children might in different settings.
Thank you all. And look, I'll maybe just ask one more question at this stage. I may come back in, but I want to give others the opportunity to ask questions as well. Rachel, you referred to this at the whole scenario as becoming stuck. So it's that we've had groups withdrawn from the stakeholder forum, and really nothing much appears to have moved on. I don't know what's going on in the background with the department, and we can hear from them. Could I ask, and for any of you who wants to pick it up, what needs to happen to unstick this situation so we can move forward? Because it's we had reached a point towards the end of the previous mandate, I think, where there was an agreed roadmap to navigate this, really, as you set out, Rachel. So how do we unstick this?
I think you have to work from a shared understanding. If all parties with their different interests and viewpoints aren't working from a shared understanding of what the basis of the work is, then we can't possibly move forward. We entered the Task and Finish group in December 2024 with the basis of our shared understanding that the department had done its own review after the Nicky report had come out, and there was a set of recommendations within that review, which included changing the legislation, putting out statutory guidance, and there's a range of different recommendations there. So we went into it with that shared understanding. And it became apparent at the very first meeting that shared understanding was no longer there, because we were presented with information that led us to believe the goalposts had shifted. But I can only speak from our experience. I can't say what's happening in the department because I actually don't know what the thinking is. It has never been explained. And the outworkings of that have been the Children's Law Centre and Nicky will always want to collaborate and work with departments and work with ministers and civil servants and work with parents and speak to everybody and try to get issues sorted out for children, as you all do as well. But if the understanding isn't, you don't have that common understanding of what you're doing and what direction you're going in, then it becomes very messy. So what you had was us coming in from a human rights basis. The department changed tact, but without explaining why, and that still hasn't been explained. We tried to, I suppose, come to a middle ground, muddle up a solution, but we got to a point where when we saw the latest draft, and ultimately we ran Harry Shakespeare's case through it and came to the conclusion that it wouldn't have been picked up. Spent many hours looking at it, trying to think, could we rejig it, could we make suggestions, is there anything more that we could suggest that we haven't already suggested, and concluded that actually we've come to a point now where as a children's rights organisation, we cannot sign up to this, regardless of whatever efforts that the drafters had tried to make to include children's rights concepts. There were concepts there, but the operational side of it didn't match that. So, to my mind, we need to ask the question: what has happened since Minister McIlveen endorsed the department's own review report and recommendations? What is that change? And is the decision now that we're not going to have legislative reform? And if so, then we're in a completely different situation. That's just not really clear to me. Chris, maybe you feel the same?
Yeah, and I suppose, just again to be brief, there are three things that I think we need to do. One is to change the legislation. It seems to me that the process is back to front. There is guidance being worked on without a legislative change. The second thing, referring to the guidance needs revised. I think we're all recognising that, with a more consistent approach, reinforcing that the use of restrictive practice is a last resort. And the third thing, and I need to be really candid and just put on the record that the process has been flawed. From my perspective, there's a total breakdown of trust and transparency. So, there are conversations happening, but there's a total lack of transparency there. And from my perspective, advice that we have given and continued to give is not reflective in any draft guidance or documentation that we have seen. So they would be my three key asks in terms of what needs to change to get this back on track.
Very, very clear, and it's not often we get such clarity, I think, from organisations that generally come here with an approach of we're here to work and deliver this in partnership. That sense that this is really has broken down. So we will have the opportunity to hear directly from the department before long. We have an oral briefing scheduled, and we can raise some of these things, but I think some of the things you're highlighting, I think we may want to raise with the department at this stage. I'd be keen to see the draft guidance that was presented to you, so we can form a view as whether or not it is acceptable or not. And I'd like to know what has been happening since really August of last year when things began to break down. But we can cover that at the end of the session.
Obviously, the RCN had left the process very early on. I think they were being quite realistic and realising that there was a really serious difficulty. All of the children's rights representatives have now left the process, and it would be interesting to find out who else has expressed concerns formally, perhaps in writing, because I'm aware that some others have done that. So there's quite a feeling that, and the other thing I'd just like to highlight is, in terms of the stakeholders around the table, there's a bit of a narrative that the teachers have different viewpoint than the children's rights organisations, and I just want to say that that's completely wrong in my opinion. We have, with the stakeholders in the Task and Finish group and other people we've met, we have found great commonality, and where there are differences in perspective, we've always been able to come together and reach a middle ground and shared understanding. So I don't accept any narrative that says this is really complicated, everyone's got different views. That is not my experience. Everybody wants the same thing, and the only difference is the change in the path that the department has taken.
You're conscious of taking up a fair bit of time there. I wanted to give you all the opportunity to answer those things fully to really set the scene, but I'll bring members in now who have indicated, and John, you had indicated there.
Yes, thank you. First of all, full empathy and compassion with the experience of Harry, and I'm glad to know that he's doing better now, but that he, do acknowledge that the trauma he still feels. I just want to frame this, because you made a very powerful case around the challenges our teachers face in the work environment. What sort of engagement have you had with the teaching unions?
Like me too?
Yeah, sure.
We generally have, I have had the opportunity to go to a number of teaching conferences. Really, that's where I've got a lot of my information from, and we would have conversation with the unions as well. My understanding is that the unions have never specifically stated a position that they say we don't want this change to happen. Every single time I have spoken to any teacher or at groups of people in conferences and taken questions from the floor and so on, so you've hundreds and hundreds of teachers, senior leaders there, my impression has been that they're really struggling with all of the difficulties with environment, resources, children placed in the wrong places, too many children, not enough space, not enough money, not enough expertise. So we're all completely agreed on what the issues and problems are. And I have never had it said to me, and I'd welcome any conversation if someone wants to come and challenge me on this or talk to me about it from a union. No union rep has ever come to me and said, we don't want any of this change. In fact, it's like, we really need help here, is the message that I get. But I'm more than happy to take an alternative opinion or view.
You say your door's open to the unions, but you haven't formally asked for a meeting with the unions to engage about this issue?
Well, not in their capacity. Yet we have had meetings with union reps.
On this issue?
And we've spoken about this issue, yes.
What was their view?
It was very much in line with ours, that this needs to be done and we need to get help. We need to have the legislative framework needs to be right. Because, it's semantics in one sense. You want to replace language that is wrong with language that is human rights compliant. So you're taking away the language of force, because what you're saying to a teacher is, use force. You can use force. Teachers will say to me, and the unions will say to us, well, are we going to be legally liable then? And my answer would be yes, potentially. You're being put in a position where if the law states that it is now, the Human Rights Act obviously still applies, and you're having to make a judgment call as to what's reasonable in terms of force that I might use. So
Yeah, I need to just cut
no
in
union
here.
member ever has said to me, and no leader of a union or rep of a leader has ever said to me, I disagree with these recommendations.
Okay. I want to get into the brass tacks, and I'll just take a little bit of time here because we have issues where teachers, and 300 have been injured in the last year. 97.89% of those are within primary schools. They are dealing with, and I understand the complexity of the issues some of the children have, but also for safety of the teacher, we have teachers being injured. And I need to make sure that we need to make sure teachers are able to protect themselves and protect other pupils when you have someone who is being violent and dysregulated, for whatever the cause of that may be. So do you accept that teachers are facing a very difficult situation with some pupil behaviour, that they do need things like personal protective equipment, training in how to do safe restraint?
You mind just if I cut in there, John? Apologies. I just want to outline that I meet with unions periodically. Each of the teaching unions actually together they meet, and from my perspective, there is a consensus across the board that there must be robust guidance. Now, I'm not going to attempt to speak for unions. I would encourage the committee to invite them along, but from my perspective, there is definitely a consensus, and I would also mention that we need to extend that conversation to unions for non-teaching staff, because a lot of the time non-teaching staff are on the front line. I'm talking about classroom assistants, for example, and what they're crying out for is legislation guidance that protects them and the child, because the reality of the situation is, I frequently visit schools and classroom assistants will talk to me about making massive decisions based on their analysis of a risk in a crisis situation, and at times they're fearful for their careers, they're fearful of making the wrong decision, and they're trying to do what's best for that child and for their peers. So there is a consensus, and I think it's disingenuous. I'm not saying you're suggesting this, but I think it would be disingenuous to suggest that there is a lack of progress because unions are in a different space.
I just asked the question. What I'm saying is, whatever legal framework you have, and I've spent decades dealing with the use of force, and nobody wants to use force in any situation. In hospitals, police officers, psychiatric patients, schools, any of the situation. But you're always going to have a decision to make as a teacher or whatever professional on the spot. How do I deal with someone who is presenting a physical risk to myself or to other children? And that is going to require a dynamic decision to be made. And our teachers should feel supported to do that if they have to do it. Because I've spoken to teachers who've been concussed, broken ribs, broken noses, broken hands.
And
this is the reality, that we need to make sure our teachers are safe and our pupils are safe and the child himself is safe.
I was just going to interject there, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
Your point is right. Obviously, our teachers need to be protected. And if there was aggressive behaviour or distressed behaviour or behaviour that's challenging to manage, the teacher needs to be safe. Absolutely, 100%. But a lot of the evidence we're also seeing is about children being injured, and predominantly male, young, non-verbal children with bruising or being held in prone positions on the floor, etc., etc. So, as you've indicated, I think it's an issue of balancing of rights and having a very robust, clear framework there for decision making that's based on human rights, and that includes the human rights of teachers as well as children and classroom assistants. That's what this intends to do, because if you have a position where we have legislation on how to use force instead of legislation on how to minimise the use of restrictive practices, acknowledging that, of course, on a common sense basis, if it's proportionate to do so and there's a serious risk of harm, of course you must intervene, and you may have to intervene physically. But then you have to record it, document it, monitor it, review it. So it's putting a framework around it to enable decision-making in planned situations and decision-making in a crisis situation. And the current framework is not fit for purpose. It's not compliant with human rights. It talks about using force, and that is the language, if you don't mind me saying, it's a bit of the language of policing and that sort of area. It doesn't fit in a children's rights perspective in a school with vulnerable, disabled, non-verbal children. So there's been unintended consequences, I think, of that legislation. It's not congruent with the Human Rights Act or with SENDO or with the United Nations conventions. I take your point. I think it's
one question, Nick.
If I just allow John to come back in with a final comment, because time is beating us, unfortunately, but just to come back with any response, and then I'll have to bring the next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key is there's a balance so that we can keep good order in the class, protect the other children in schools, protect the vulnerable children who may be dysregulated, and protecting our teachers from injury. On that final point where you said about documenting things and recording things for learning and for an audit base and for accountability, what about the provision of enabling teachers who are dealing in that situation high-end dynamic risk to be able to pop on a body-worn video camera just so that there was a record of the interaction between the teacher and the pupil, and that would then capture that both for learning but also for evidence gathering?
I think that's going right outside this conversation to a point. It sounds again a wee bit like a policing response. You might want to speak to the unions about that. That's for teachers or unions to think about rather than us. I think that's fraught with difficulty as well, so it would require very careful consideration.
But you do accept the point that, well, first of all, these things are used well outside of policing in all sorts of capacities. But there is a need for teachers to feel that they can stand over the context of the difficult dynamic situation they're involved in. And often when someone looks at that from afar, you don't understand the context of that without seeing it on a video.
We'll just have
and there's both learning from that.
Conclusion, John,
as I put the record.
Given way beyond the allocated time. So final comment.
15 seconds. John, 3 points, and this is what teachers, classroom assistants are telling us. They want training, like a police officer would get. They want guidance, like a police officer would get, and they want to record to protect not only them but the child. Very simple. And the third point, publish the guidance and consult on it. At the minute, this is not transparent, and then have the conversation.
Thank you. I'm sorry, and I know this is an issue that there are very, very strong feelings around. I want to give people the opportunity to have their questions answered, but obviously to keep an eye to time. Danny, you'd indicated that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. I'm sorry that this even happened, but even today, when Harry's doing okay, there's still children, because there's no guidance, because there's no legislation in place, because children are being placed in the wrong settings, that incidents, maybe not as severe, is continuing to happen. And what's really disappointing, just listening already, is that back in 2022, there seemed to be a broad consensus that it was heading in the right direction, and then very quickly everything seems to have unravelled. What has the Minister been doing or engaging with yourselves, or even Dergy yourself? Have they given reassurances? Because yesterday, if anyone's seen the interview from Alma Wade, and you heard then the Minister for Health say, "We've run out of time. This mandate's done. So whatever is going to happen going forward, regardless, it's too late. So we have to look to the next mandate." And you think how far back Harry's campaign has been. It's not good enough. I think
this mandate has been wasted. Largely, I feel as if a lot of time, effort, and energy was put into a process that possibly was never intended to come to a successful conclusion, because the starting point of it and the point it ended at just didn't really move. Prior to that, the process had been, it started with Nicky's report and reference group, advisory group, and then the department had a reference group which we were all on. And I know, Deirdre, you had spoken to members of the reference group, and the department had consulted with Deirdre and other parents. And I actually really enjoyed going to the meetings. It's a strange thing to say, but it was such a collaborative effort. Everybody could have their view. Everyone spoke together. We shared. We had a bit of banter about what we wanted to happen. We reached agreement. We moved forward, and it was really positive and a really good process. And ended with the Minister's statement at the time, before the Assembly had gone down. And then when we came back we thought we were going into a similar process, albeit the minister had changed, civil servants had changed, and it was a task and finish group as opposed to a reference group, and it was meant to be looking at the guidance post-consultation. But we haven't had the consultation report, I don't believe, on the guidance that was consulted on. So we're going in there, working in the dark. We don't have another draft. We didn't get another draft until just before we, that decision that I talked about, but we looked at it and couldn't accept it. That took 7 months. The process was very, very fraught. There was a lack of transparency. I'd agree with Chris on that. You were getting bits and scraps of information. It just wasn't the same type of process. But when you're, in terms of the minister, you'd asked what was his engagement. I mean, we wrote to the minister thinking, well, could we have a conversation with the minister, a frank conversation, and listen to what his point of view is and let him listen to us. But he refused our request to meet. And just to rub salt in the wounds a wee bit, our youth group had wanted to meet with the minister, and they had written to him. We've got a fantastic youth advisory group. And there's 17 very disappointed young people who are so invested in talking to the Minister about education, or they'll talk about any subject to any minister or any politician. They've had me on a podcast and given me a good grilling, actually, and that they really are knowledgeable and powerful young people from all different backgrounds, some of whom have disabilities as well. And they wanted to talk to the Minister more generally about education and their views. And it would have been a fantastic opportunity for both them and him, but he wasn't able to make time in his diary for the young people. So, they're feeling a wee bit disenfranchised. But I just feel there hasn't been any engagement directly from the Minister, and he has just said, really, it's up to my civil servants who are working on this, you can deal with them. We've reached an impasse, and we haven't had any acknowledgement or word of that,
And this, what you say is that they had, so the DE moved the goalpost. So if a minister's telling you, go and deal with my civil servants, but then they go and move the goalpost, just advocating any responsibility, and I'm trying to think of better words, it almost feels like he just put 2 fingers up to all of us.
I honestly can't speak for the Minister.
Yeah.
I would very much welcome a direct conversation with the Minister. I would have been very keen to do that, just to try and get a real feel for what his position is, and to understand why it is a change in policy, because the position we've been told is the Minister's considering whether or not to make the repeal or take that forward. But we're years on now, and I think we have to look at the facts of the situation and go, it's a decision not to do it because it won't happen. It's not going to happen. And there's no sign of it happening, and he obviously doesn't want to do it, but I cannot tell you why, because I haven't been told.
Yeah. And we're going to run out of time, I think, and that's why I made that point around the health minister yesterday. Like, he let it out, it's just, I don't have no time to do anything going forward, so let's put it on to the next month.
I just feel, primarily I feel for Deirdre and for Harry.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to bring it back to Harry. We're talking about very vulnerable children here, and very vulnerable families who have done so much work, and then that's just all been thrown into the shredder.
Again, just very briefly, Chair, I'm just looking at the timeline from our perspective, and there are various points in this timeline where my office and I have requested some clarity on when final decisions will be made, and with regards to commitments made by the previous minister. We haven't yet received an acknowledgement that both CLC and Nikki stood down from the task and finish group, which is disappointing. I did have a conversation with his officials as part of a separate periodic meeting, but I do think it is disappointing that we haven't received a formal response, and I do agree with Rachel that time has passed, and the process just, again, I think we've said it a few times, that the process is not, it certainly doesn't feel co-design, it doesn't feel transparent, and I wonder, even has this committee seen any papers with regards to draft guidance, and if not, why not?
I think we should be fair and clarify as well. The Minister has met with Deirdre,
Yes,
and that's, they've had a private meeting, and we don't intend to bring any private discussions into this forum, but just to acknowledge that there was a meeting, but there hasn't been any outworkings in terms of any moving forward with legislation or anything like that.
Thank you. Michelle, you were next.
Thank you. Thanks, folks. I just wanted to start, Deirdre, by thanking you for your contribution. It was very moving, and I think it was exactly the right context for us to be asking questions and to set the context around this issue. I think this work all started with Harry. and it's the right perspective to come from, and that's not dismissing at all any concerns teachers or others may have. But what we're trying to address here is the vulnerabilities in the current guidance and legislation that allowed Harry to come to harm. So thanks for explaining that so eloquently as you did. I'm going to start with the health guidance and health staff in schools, because they're operating under two separate sets of guidance now. And I just want to understand if you can explain to us why it would be important to have consistent guidance between those workers in the health setting and in the education setting, because sometimes it's presented to us that there are very different settings and therefore different guidance is appropriate. My sense from the 3 steps to good practice, I'm probably saying that wrong, 3 steps of positive practice,
the 3 steps, yeah.
that is working effectively and is handling these situations. So if you wouldn't mind explaining to us why that would be beneficial.
I think the health guidance came first, and actually when it's regional guidance, when it was published, one of the things we thought was very good, first of all, because it's very human rights based, very well drafted. But one of the comments that we made was that it should have been cross-departmental, because our point was, well, children need their rights protected at the same level, using standard definitions across all departments. But that didn't happen, so health published their own guidance. Education are very far behind the curve with all of this stuff around restrictive practice and including deprivation of liberty. They're trying to catch up. It doesn't naturally fit in the education space. It is more of a health, they're more familiar with it. But really, I suppose health had done the homework, if you like. They had set the definitions. It's not really operational guidance, it's more high-level guidance. And my thinking on it is that it should have been quite a straightforward task to take across the human rights principles, the standard definitions, maybe with a little bit of a tweak, and that high level, do these steps, here's how you plan those 3 steps to positive practice. All of that was completely transferable. I would acknowledge that there might be some operational differences on the ground, and that's for educationalists to work out with the department, because they are working with the children directly. So I think it was a great source of frustration throughout the process. Why are we doing this the hard way? The homework's all done. Health certainly tried to support. Health colleagues very much tried to support the process. I think there's a nuanced relationship between health and education in this, and the cooperation isn't smooth, as is the case in many areas, and that needs a lot of work. But health did engage. They came to a workshop. I think they had suggested a workshop to try and move forward with the definition side of things and work through any misunderstanding. That was a really good workshop, actually. And then we got the draft after that, and it was just, I know that the drafters did try, but it just wasn't coherent. So, and then if you've got a health worker, say, a speech and language therapist going in and working in a special school, and they have to follow the health guidance, and then you've got education has a different guidance with different definitions and different standards about what human rights means. How on earth are you meant to, work that through? Mm-hmm. It's very confusing, and I think it should be it's not going to be exactly the same at this point. They have diverged, but it should be as well aligned as possible. Now, the department did commit to some form of alignment, and the workshop did work through the definitions a bit better, but after 7 months we're still talking about definitions when that was the easy bit. So I think that gives you a bit of a feel for it. Chris, have you anything you wanted to add to that?
No, nothing to add. I do think there's a potential blueprint there, that can be followed, but I would agree with everything you've said.
Yeah. Also, I just wanted to pick up, when we're talking about these reforms, I think it's always quite specific that we want to repeal Article 41C.
Yes.
Can you explain, Rachel, I know particularly you've done this at this committee a number of times, but just again for clarity, just explain that there are protections then that remain for children, for staff, with A and B staying intact.
Yes, I think what you need to do is look at the legislation that you want to reform. Mm-hmm. You're wanting to basically delete Article 41C, which is about order and discipline. Yeah. Even the guidance that is related to that legislation says that use of force should be very rare, and that's not the experience. So we know it doesn't work. It hasn't worked, and quite robust guidance has not worked on its own. What you need to then do is open the conversation about what should the legislation say. Is a power to restrain, is reasonable force actually what we should be talking about? My view is actually slightly broader than the Children's Commissioners. The Children's Law Centre is slightly broader in that we would say all of Article 4 should be looked at, the language should be looked at, and a different framework needs to be leaned on, namely a human rights framework, which we have in the form of the Human Rights Act and the associated convention. So you're taking something away and then you need to check, well, do we need to put something in its place or do we have enough? That's the work you would then do at that stage. So we had agreed in principle, that's not suitable in this day and age to have that for order and discipline. You know, it's a small shade away from smacking children, if you ask me. And it's a hangover from those times, that language of using force. Teachers don't want to go into school and use force. They don't want to have a framework about how to use force. They want to have a framework about how to make sure children are happy and cared for and have everything they need, so they don't get distressed.
Very brief.
Yeah.
Brief final
It's
point.
just to continue a
yeah.
point the guys have already made earlier. You'd referenced the fact that there had been agreement on this, that there was a review done, that there was change anticipated, and you'd explain to us that it had changed. Can I just be really clear on why you think things changed? Why is that agreement not there anymore?
Absolutely no idea, because we have asked the question, we have written letters, we've explained our position ad infinitum. After we withdrew, we both wrote a joint letter explaining, you know, you won't meet with us, but here's all of our reasoning if this helps you, and here's what we think should happen. I mean, maybe Chris, you've had more dealings with the department since.
Yeah, I mean, I would be the same.
Briefly as possible, Chris.
Yeah, just the answer is I don't know why the change, and in fact, departmental officials sometimes seem to be on the fence themselves, and on the one hand they're telling us, well, there is no U-turn, on the other hand we're getting other messages. So the answer is I don't know why the change. I suspect, and with respect to the Minister, it is a big issue that he's grappling with, and you know, we'll have to give him the benefit that he's trying to consider all of this, but I don't know why the step change.
Thank you, folks.
Okay. Cara, you'd indicated next.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much to the panel. Deirdre, I just want to thank you so much for your campaigning on this, which has been you've been so committed over the years since I first met you on your doorstep to now. It's incredible as a mother how you've been so resilient and really fought for, you know, just justice on this issue. I just have a few wee questions around what kind of engagement have you had with the Minister so far, and how has your campaign been received?
So I had an invite to meet the Minister last year, and I shared Harry's experience with him, and I felt like I had a very positive experience with the Minister, and I thought he was very welcoming, and I thought he listened. But after that, we had a meeting with the department, with his officials, and if I'm being honest, I don't really feel like I feel like the progression has come to a standstill, which means that the campaign has come to a standstill. I mean, we've been doing this, we arrived here in the steps in 2019. And it feels like we're making progress, and then it falls back again. We're making progress and then it falls back, and it feels like it's been repetitively like that, which isn't progressive for children, because you know, everyone should be safe in schools, children and staff, and this shouldn't be at odds with one another. You know, we just want both staff and pupils to be safe, and I suppose that's the premise of our campaign, and recognising the harm as well. I suppose that has been a huge undertaking for us as a family, because we've had to put ourselves out there, which is a very, very difficult thing to do, but all in all, I feel like we have just come to a standstill, if I'm being honest, Cara.
And it's probably re-traumatizing in many ways, having to retell your experience as a family and not seeing the outcome that you want to see. And you're right, human rights should never be seen as controversial or lagging. Can I just ask then, off the back of that, you've touched on the importance of, for children like your son, Deirdre, the right to access, I suppose, mental health support to really process the horrific things that they've had to go through and had to endure. Do you know if anything exists currently to support these children, or can you really outline to the committee today what changes you would like to see?
Well, as a family ourselves, we had found we had absolutely no support for Harry. Initially then we did see CAMHS, we were offered medications, but no one actually wanted to get down to the real understanding of what happened. Oh, my mind's gone blank.
Okay, so it's about mental health services.
Yeah, mental health services. And because Harry is non-speaking, we'd find that those support services just aren't there. They just don't exist.
Yeah, could I just come in on the back of what you've said, Deirdre? And Cara, I think the really shocking thing for me is that there are, through casework in Nicky, there are instances where children are still experiencing these things, similar to what Harry experienced, and sometimes very young children. And that the impact is, I can't find the words, it is such a horrendous experience. And as I say, through casework we are dealing with some children and families who have continued to experience this, and only through chance we've found that this is happening, because in Harry's case he couldn't talk, he couldn't tell a story. For other younger children, they would struggle to articulate, in terms of both restraint and seclusion, and sometimes being locked in rooms. So I'll just pause there. I think the impact thing, Cara, was the question that you were asking about, and from my perspective we're still seeing this harm happening.
You don't recognise that a practice has occurred or that it's in any way infringing human rights. How can you possibly provide a remedy?
Yeah. I know that was one thing the minister had said is, if we look at restraint and seclusion, if that's taken away, what else do we do? But we know that there's guidelines and safeguarding that can take place to ensure that children feel safe in the classroom. Classroom assistants and teachers feel safe without, breaching their fundamental right to human rights. So thank you so much for everything that you've done as a panel, and Deirdre too specifically. It's really educated us about this issue. I know that I'm content, and I'm going to put in a question to the minister to just identify what kind of mental health support is there for families like yourself who have been just this barbaric sort of practice, have been so traumatized. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. It's just not. I just wanted to say it's not there. There is very, very limited support, and I think the reason why it's not there is because this isn't recognised as an issue.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You, Cara. David, you'd indicated.
Thank you very much, Chair. Like everyone else, I want to start off by thanking Deirdre for presentation here today, but also the ongoing campaign that she's had and raising raising this issue for us all, and frankly to the email that, if you don't mind me saying, he sent me after the debate in the Assembly Chamber, which I thought was very gracious, because it did acknowledge that I think that we all want to get to the same place. Yeah. Certainly nobody around this table, I think, lacks compassion towards children who have been through this trauma and these difficult circumstances. What there is just some of us, I think, require convincing that we're not creating more issues by tinkering with the legislation. And I said in my email to yourself, Deirdre, that was something that I struggled with, and I've said in this committee. If I'm honest, it's one issue probably on everything that we've discussed in this committee that I don't feel particularly qualified to decide where the line should be on. I don't know if I'll ever feel that way. It's a very difficult issue. That being said, I want to move on with a couple of questions, because I don't necessarily appreciate some of the tone and response that we've had today, but I'll come to that. In the first instance, I want to ask Rachel, in terms of 4.1c, and a genuine question, do you believe that the way in which Harry was treated is compliant with 4.1c? Do you think if a teacher done that today?
I don't. I was thinking that to myself earlier as the conversation was unfolding, and I think you could make the case that it wasn't. Yeah. Because he was restrained in a way that wasn't proportionate. So was it reasonable would be the question. So
And I would
possibly
agree,
not.
and it's
Yeah.
not. I don't intend that as a sort of
Yeah.
gotcha or anything.
No, and I
it's
don't.
case
I
of-
have no. There's no difficulty with that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is boundaries in the current legislation,
Yes.
but because of the terminology and the way that it's framed, it's more likely to be misunderstood, and the evidence is that it has been misunderstood.
I understand the,
Yeah.
the views that you put forward, and that I think all I'm trying to draw out there is that 4.1c, and it's completely legitimate to feel that that is something that needs to be changed and to argue for that. But I do feel it's also legitimate for those of us who are more nervous around that element to say that this is not a silver bullet. This does not mean
No,
that,
it's not a silver
and
bullet.
also,
No.
and also, it does not legitimise treatment like Harry's. The way Harry was treated was clearly wrong. It was repugnant, and 4.1c I don't think is an excuse for that behaviour. And there'll be more grey areas than Harry's. Harry's, I think we can all look at and say was particularly bad, and there'll be grey areas.
I can understand the point that you're making there. I think it's a valid discussion to have in terms of what does Article 4.1c do and what does it not do, and what could we achieve by taking ourselves down a slightly more progressive route, if I could put it that way, to really focusing on a human rights-based style of legislative provision, if legislative provision is what's preferred to safeguard everybody's interests. I think the whole difficulty arises when you put different pieces of legislation beside each other and they're not marrying up, and the language of force doesn't sit with the human rights language. And funny enough, the Human Rights Act was enacted in the same year, but no one was obviously talking to each other about that, you know.
I think, and fair, I think that addresses probably because I think it's a better. I felt earlier on in your contribution, you probably dismissed some of the arguments that you thought were going to come in that way, and I think from my point of view, it was putting across that there is a genuine engagement with this issue, but where some of us, and you speak very confidently in terms of feeling that you're speaking to the voices of many teachers. And I would suggest that not all teachers are going to go to the Children's Law Society if they have concerns about how this kind of legislation would affect them.
To be very welcome to do that, because I'd love to hear I'd love to get us a few hours of a debate and a discussion on that.
I don't doubt you would welcome them. I'm just making the point that not all teachers will necessarily feel that is the place to go to express those concerns. Some might, some won't, but there are teachers who will be nervous and in terms of how a change in the legislation affects them, and I think it can be disingenuous to suggest that a change in the legislation will make it much more clear-cut for teachers, and teachers will fear less litigation in terms of if they make a wrong step, because that's what we're talking about here. Teachers fearing that if they make a wrong step, they're going to end up in court, not because they've been deliberately cruel to a child, but because in a particular situation they've made a choice, and maybe sometimes that's the wrong side of the line, and because they've made that choice in a difficult situation, they're going to be litigated against. I think that's going to happen whether we have the current legislation or the next.
That safeguards everyone. I think that's an absolutely fair point. And that framework has to start with the rights-based framework. And if you look at the health guidance, they have struck that balance really well, but they haven't had to grapple with the difficulty of having a piece of legislation that talks about using force against a vulnerable group. They don't have that difficulty. Education does have that difficulty. And I think all views should be heard. And all views, if teachers hold a particular view, they're very legitimately entitled to come and bring them. Yeah. But I would sort of say to you, we're a bit past that point, because the department did a review, listened to all those views and decided that it should change the legislation. And now there's been a change in that, and we don't know why. So that's causing us great difficulty, as you can imagine, when you don't have that open conversation. But no, I think it's a fair point if people are saying that to you, for you to raise that. And if anyone wants to raise that with us, I am very happy to speak to them and try and work it through it. It is complex. Yeah. And legislation and guidance is not a silver bullet, because you need the resources, the training and everything else.
No, I appreciate that, and I understand that there's been a change in stance there in terms of the departmental view, in terms of at least rethinking some of it or holding back on making a firm decision on it. I get that, and I understand why it's frustrating for those who are convinced in a particular way and want to argue in a particular way. All I wanted to get on the record was that for those of us who are not yet convinced that is the right way to go, and it's not ruling it out, but it's not yet convinced of it, certainly, I think we are also genuine in the points that we're putting across, because we're wanting to make sure we get the right balance between the protection of our children and the protection of our teachers and teaching assistants. Thank you.
Very happy to talk to you about that in future if you'd like to do that.
Can I just say,
Dave?
one thing?
Yeah, again, just briefly,
Yeah.
but yes, I appreciate. I know
Yeah.
that there is I understand the need to answer clearly and accurately and expansively.
Just
on all
one
this,
very
but-
brief point. I mean, if that's the case, why not consult? Why not publish draft guidance and consult? And let's hear those concerns.
The department will be.
We can certainly ask the department that question as to where their intentions
there
are
has
in that
been a
regard.
consultation, and perhaps we don't have the consultation report, so if there are concerns, we don't have a record of what they are.
Yeah. And Kathy, you're indicated.
Thanks, Chair. Deirdre, I actually feel a wee bit stupid saying thank you. I'm someone who has heard your story before, yet today was extremely powerful. As the mummy of a wee boy to another mummy of a wee boy, I could see the pain in your face, and it's horrific to even think of what you have been through. But I suppose pride isn't the right word, but the pride I feel for you sitting here right now, fighting this fight for everybody else, I'm getting choked up myself, is really, really powerful. That's something you said is really going to stick with me. I don't really have a question, but the fact that you said Harry has big emotions, he just doesn't know where to put them. I just think that sums up so many of the conversations that we have in here. So thanks for that, even though I feel stupid saying that. What I kind of want to say is the conversation that's just happened between Rachel and David right now has actually been helpful. It's actually been that you can kind of hear maybe where concerns are and things like that. And to me, the fact that there's no immediate agreement in this shouldn't mean that we just stop talking about it, and shouldn't mean that the department just goes radio silence, or the minister just does radio silence. This is the conversations that need to be had to try and iron these out and come to some sort of consensus. But for God's sake, we can't just stop here and not have something come out of the end of this. So I really do feel that the onus now is on us to hold the department to account, but to try and just find out what the way forward is for Harry and for everybody else that is going through this right now. So like I said, I don't have a question, but because you have been so clear and concise as to what's actually needed, I think we have a much better understanding now on how we move forward and what we need to do now to try and get this moving. So thanks again.
Thank you, Kathy. I think just to conclude, again, I'll just echo the thanks for the evidence today. Deirdre, I don't want to overkill it. I mean, you know that it's appreciated, and the committee understands, that this doesn't get any easier, and we absolutely understand that. And I think the lack of progress probably adds to the fact that it doesn't get any easier to have to give this evidence. So we do thank you. Thanks both to Chris and Rachel for giving us really good detailed evidence today, and we'll have a conversation now as a committee around where to go next, but we have officials coming in the schedule, so there's plenty of material for us to work with in terms of that next briefing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so just while the witnesses are making their way out, I would like to make a suggestion on this. There are some specific things that I think we can be asking for, but I would actually like to suggest very often in a response to evidence sessions, there is a desire maybe for parties to make points to the minister or whatever. I would like to maybe just get a bit of correspondence, if we could land on it, that just acknowledges just how important this is to get it right for the children who are at the centre of it, for the teachers and classroom assistants working in our schools to get this right. And I would really like, if possible, that we could land on a piece of correspondence that just sets out the committee's strong desire to see progress reinstated on this, and engagement reinstated, and really to encourage the department to reach out to make that engagement, rather than having a pop at anybody. We've reached a point where we're not making progress, but I think we owe it to Harry and to the other children still in the system to be a positive voice, arguing for re-engagement to be re-established. So I would like to suggest we write to the department and the minister on that basis. Danny?
Yeah, no problem. But and well, not really having a pop, but how hard is it to meet the Children's Law Centre and the Children's Commissioner? Like, I don't know. I think that sends a clear message than anything. But look, happy to go along with it, but I don't think it's good enough.
Yeah, look, I am unclear why we've had an impasse that seems to have been running since August. So I mean, I would like to suggest that we we send a clear piece of correspondence to the department and to the Minister that we, as a committee, across the parties, would simply encourage and urge them to re-engage and to restart the process if we're agreed on that. Yeah, I think there are a couple of specifics that it might be worth highlighting in advance of the department's briefing when they come to us, and I would want to suggest that some of the draft, if there's a draft version of guidance that the committee could see to help us understand maybe where things reached, that would be helpful, and any other correspondence between the department and the participants in the Task and Finish group, I think, again, just to help us to understand just what the state of play was in terms of where it reached, and then maybe what the next steps might be. So if members are content just to raise that with the department purely in advance of the briefing, if we're also agreed on that. Agreed? Okay. So that moves us on then to item 7 on the agenda. So assuming the witnesses are here and available, so it is another oral briefing in relation to the committee's inquiry into SEND provision and transformation. And we have an oral briefing today from both Department of Education and EA officials. So just while witnesses are making their way in, I'd refer members to the clerk's briefing at page 136 of your packs. We have a briefing paper from the department at page 3 of tabled papers, and a Department of Education briefing paper on the SEND reform agenda and delivery plan from back in March of last year at page 121. So we also have a letter from the department following up on the last SEND evidence session that's tabled there in correspondence for members, if that is helpful. So joining us today, I'll just run through our witnesses here. We have Deirdre Ward, Director of SEND Strategic Policy at the department. We have Judy McBride, Head of Special Education Review Team in the department. Dr. Thomas Adele, Chief Transformation Officer in the EA, and Craig Donaghy, the SEND Transformation Programme Director within the EA. So you're all very welcome here again today. So no point really with too much preamble here. We're in the middle of the inquiry, and we are really pleased to now be in that phase where we're hearing evidence from the department. And again, I think it is welcome. We're having joint evidence from the department and the EA in relation to this, because the policy and the operational element clearly have to align. So you are very welcome. I'll hand over to you for any initial presentation you wish to make. I don't know if it's Deirdre or it'd be Deirdre who'd be kicking off with that. So I'll hand over to you, and then we'll move to question and answer. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking the committee for the opportunity to brief you on the work being taken forward by ourselves as the department and with our colleagues in the Education Authority, who are jointly delivering 3 of the early actions from the Special Educational Needs Reform Delivery Plan. It's crucial that collaboration underpins the delivery of the actions from the delivery plan, and that our joint attendance today underscores the significance of this approach. The early actions being discussed represent an important and ambitious shift in how we support children and young people with SEN, embodying a move towards earlier intervention, greater inclusion, improved transparency and enhanced professional capability across the educational sector and workforce. Successful delivery of these actions will create the conditions required for a more coherent, outcomes-focused system, which is capable of delivering the right support at the right time for highly skilled and confident professionals. I don't intend to take members through each of the early actions in any great detail, as this information has already been provided in the briefing paper you've received. Instead, I'd like to ensure you that there's sufficient time available to address any specific questions you might have. So I'll just give a very brief update on the 3 early actions, which include the digitisation of the statutory assessment process, transforming the support model, and design and trial of a teacher and classroom assistant professional learning programme. So begin with digitisation. So I'm pleased to advise the committee that on the 12th of January, EA launched a new digital platform for the statutory assessment process. This marks an important initial step towards a more modern, efficient and accessible system, which enhances transparency, enables secure communication and it provides improved digital support for parents, carers and schools. So at 2 o'clock today, 860 referrals had been received through the portal. So that's as up to date as we can get it. The efficiencies delivered through digitisation will play a critical role in enabling EA to meet the new statutory assessment timescales of 22 weeks that are being introduced under the new SEN framework later in the year. We have a briefing with yourselves next week on the SEN framework. Closely aligned with this statutory assessment and statementing process is the wider issue of how support is delivered in the classroom. At present, we have a system that relies heavily on an almost universal model of one-to-one classroom assistance support. But there's a growing body of research demonstrating that one-to-one classroom assistance does not deliver the best outcomes for most children, and in some cases can be counterproductive. During engagement with schools, they have been clear that they want a more flexible, child-centred model that sufficiently recognises their professional judgment. In partnership with the EA, we are exploring the best way to deliver a needs-led whole school support model which delivers improved outcomes for children and young people with the statement of SEN. And this will build capacity across the education system and strengthen multidisciplinary practice. Schools will be able to allocate resources more effectively, focusing on the specific needs of individual children and students. EA will set standards to promote fair support for everyone, supporting both innovation and consistency. Progress to date has focused on undertaking a comprehensive analysis of the needs of 34,000 children with the statement of SEN across Northern Ireland, alongside an assessment of the current support arrangements in place. A co-design approach is currently being adopted to ensure that all elements of the enhanced model of support are informed by the lived experience, professional expertise and operational insight of those working within and impacted by the system. It's important to emphasise that classroom assistants will continue to play a highly valued role in our schools and will remain integral to any future approaches. Work's currently underway to stabilise, strengthen and professionalise the classroom assistant role through improved contractual arrangements, career development options and the creation of specialist roles aligned to the enhanced models of support. Changing how the support for children and young people with a statement of SEN is delivered brings opportunity for earlier and more effective intervention, improved use of resources and the professional development of the current workforce. Combined with the work of the new local impact teams, schools will be better equipped to meet the needs of children and young people in their settings. There's no doubt that successful implementation of SEN reform is dependent on a confident, skilled and appropriately supported workforce, and we recognise that sustained investment in the education workforce is long overdue. The SEN reform agenda seeks to strengthen the minimum SEN content in initial teacher education and to develop early professional development training for newly qualified teachers to ensure regular high-quality training on SEN, disabilities and inclusive practice. In addition, there will be a new professional learning programme for teaching staff, a leadership programme for SENCOs and a universal SEN training programme for all frontline staff. This project's in the early stages of development and will be taken forward in partnership with the EA and higher education institutes. Our commitment is to invest meaningfully in the education workforce so that every member of staff feels supported, valued and equipped with the skills and the confidence that they need to support their children in the classroom today and in the future. I'm going to hand over to Thomas, who I know has some additional comments.
And I'll try to keep them very brief. First of all, to say thank you for bringing us back here. It's really important to work here, and I also want to say on a note that it's really important with both EA and DA here. We work very well together in SEN. There's no barriers between us. We speak most days, and that's the way we get the best outcomes. So at the starting point of everything we do in EA and the department, of course, is the outcomes of children and young people. That is absolutely what we do. That's the same in SEN, and for children with statement of SEN, we know that currently we do not provide the best outcomes possible. That is, I'm going to be as blunt saying that current model support is not the optimal what we have. Every day we have a current model, our children are not getting the support that we should provide to make them thrive and have the best outcomes possible. That is something that I struggle to live with, and something that, and it's therefore the driver for change. This is what keeps me up at night, is how do we change this to make it better. We have a huge amount of data in EA. We have analysed, as Deirdre said, 34,000 existing statements and come up with something like 1,400 combinations of need. It's a fairly good data. We try to visualise it. It became too messy because it's too detailed. The solution to those to that need currently is essentially 3 options. We have special schools, specialist provision, and the classroom assistant. And that is a fairly blunt tool for a very varied need. And we need to make sure the need actually what the support model matches the need. So we need to do better. We have a huge dedicated classroom assistant workforce. They work tirelessly to support the children with a statement of SAN, but we don't recognise their work. Many of those staff are highly skilled, experienced, and are trained, and yet they are the lowest paid member of staff in our schools. That's not right. We need to create a system where we professionalise, specialise the classroom assistant workforce, where people have their skills experience they have are matched with the needs of children, and that we have career progressions, job satisfaction, and they will help our children grow and develop and therefore have better outcomes when they leave education. That is the purpose of what it is we're doing. We want to build on the good quality people we have. We want to identify the experience and expertise, and we want to specialise the skills so we're matching needs with skills of support. I also want to bring in other professionals in schools. We need to have health and social care, we need to have youth workers, we need to have others. We talked about before, I'm not going to talk about details, but that needs to be part of the model. And of course we need specialist teachers and other specialists who can deliver that level. It's about having a multidisciplinary, multi-specialism workforce in the school at different tiers meeting different needs. This works in many other places of the world. That's if you're looking at other parts of the world where they have good outcomes, that's what they do. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that as well. There's no reason why we can't have the good outcomes that others have. So that's why we need to change. We need to also recognise the people who know our children best and that know how to support children are our schools and school leaders and school staff. Therefore, we want to give the power to school leaders to drive changes, to decide exactly how their support should be delivered in schools. We appreciate our pressures on workforce and school leaders. We need to provide systems to support that while we're doing this well. But I'm not going into detail on that simply because of time pressures here now. But fundamentally, this is about creating better outcomes for children and young people. We need to have a system that maximises their potential to deliver, and currently we don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for the opening remarks. I want to go straight to that new model of support that you've both highlighted, and I think, Deirdre, you described it as needs-led whole school support model. That was how you described it. I'm just going to ask if you could just talk me through how you envisage that. What will it look like? Because I think it's really quite far away from what we have right now. Right now, the process tends to be assigning an adult to a child, and that tends to follow them then through their school journey. So can whoever feels they want to take it to talk me through, to give us a sense of what that new model would look like in practice, how it would operate?
Well, I'll start off maybe. So for us, it's about seeing, can we get the delivery of support services to children to the level closest and nearest to knowing the child, which is within the school. So that whole model of support might mean that a child needs some help with behaviours. It might be support with occupational therapy. It might mean, support with literacy or any of those things. What are the individual exact circumstances of that child's need, and how does the school best support that child's support needs to be helped and engaged to move forward? So it could be that for some children, they absolutely still will need a classroom assistant, and that might be when they have very complex medical needs that need help and support throughout the day. But for other children, it could be that other forms of support that helps them with behaviours, helps them with communication, might be more appropriate and might support their learning journey to be more effective in the long term, achieving better outcomes. Thomas?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the starting point is the 5 SEND categories we have. So we want people to have specialised and professionalised in those SEND categories. So school can meet the needs of those of children that has those needs. We want there to be different tiering or banding or whatever language you want to use here. I don't want to sound bad when using this, but essentially it's some people who are more skilled and experienced are a higher band or higher tier or grade and can therefore meet the more complex children. People at lower band can help a different group of children, and then career progression through those. That builds a model in a school where you have a workforce that is much more agile, much more flexible to meet the needs of children, and they can easily change and grow as a child changes and grows. I mean, the need of a child in P1 is not the same as the need of a child in year 12. That needs are different. So we need to have the need must change with the child. By having that kind of model, we create stability in the school as well. That these staff, they should be permanent employees. They shouldn't be temporary staff. As Secretary Deirdre said, just one thing I want to say there, I don't want to call them assistants. I think we need to change that language because they're not assistants. They are their own skill set that support children. And that's more semantics, I know, but I mean, I think that highlights the point that this is not a second tier staff. This is an own workforce.
Could I just then to take it a bit further, because some of that still feels a wee bit aspirational, quite theoretical. But your briefing suggests beginning to roll this out in September this year, with full rollout September 28th. So it's really just to get a sense of what do you anticipate this will look like. And I'm just not clear at the minute, is that a resource of highly qualified, well-trained classroom assistants that are situated in a school that can be deployed as that school sees fit? Will that also be combined with other external EA support professionals coming in, health professionals coming in? Because some of the concerns I have would be that we don't have a structure that provides good training and support for classroom assistants. We don't have a system of contracts that even provides them with security. And when we're looking at the rollout of the LITs, we're hearing from schools they're struggling to get the support in that they need. So if we're already dealing with those challenges, and we know that there are massive problems in terms of the capacity of health to weigh in, how do we move this beyond a theoretical aspiration to something that is actually being delivered on the ground in schools, potentially from September?
So I think there's two aspects of it. One is that we can have a model that we can start to implement this year. We're not going to finish implementing it this year. I mean, I just want to make it really clear. Some aspects of a model might be quicker to implement. So already 150 schools do things differently that are more towards this kind of model. So those schools, we can encourage those schools to develop and do even more, which is a good start. I mean, we have really good examples from real life how this works. Some aspect of this, for example, bringing in healthcare professionals in larger numbers, will take quite a long time. And there's no way around it because we need to train up new staff. I mean, we have 95-ish education psychologists in EA. There aren't really that many others to employ in Northern Ireland. So even if we wanted to employ them tomorrow, we couldn't. We require Ed Sykes to have a doctorate in education psychology, which is right. But maybe then it's creating a different model that we have someone at psychology assistants, for example, that have a degree in psychology. They can deliver on the direction of an Ed Psych. And it's those kind of balances, but some of those discussions that will take significantly longer because there's new models of staff with healthcare professionals. That will take a number of years to get those things, and there's no way around saying that. But if we don't try to change, we will never get to that point. So you must create the model to start the change to get there. If you know what I mean. If we wait until it's perfect, we will wait forever.
And then I'll ask a final question, and then I'll bring others in. It's a big shift, and I think there will be different views around this table around the one-to-one classroom assistant model. Does it need reform? Does it not? And other members can speak for themselves on that. But I think what we would all be agreed on, and I think I'm okay to speak for committee, is that yes, enhanced training and an enhancement of the role of classroom assistants and better terms and conditions, we would all be supportive of that. It is a big shift moving to that sort of model. We're conscious of the budgetary constraints in the system. So I mean, how do we resource that enhanced workforce that you aspire to?
And there's two answers here. So first of all, obviously, how much money is allocated to SEN has and should be a political decision. I just want to stress that EA delivers. The current model creates uncontrollable spend that is not value for money. So if my spend currently is in the region roughly £700 million, I estimate that if we continue what we're doing now, my spend by 2030 will be over £1 billion. So if you do a model that does things differently, that is cheaper than that. It is cheaper than what they're delivering now. That to me is quite a good starting point. This is not about cutting, saving money for me. This is about investing the money we have better to get better outcomes. So that's a simple answer.
There's a lot more I could go in response to that, but I think I'll bring other members in just in the interest of time, and we'll see where we are. So I've got an indication from John, and then Kathy next. Oh.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks. That was really useful as ever. Would you agree that in order to have child-centred local impact teams, we need to minimise working from home? Recently, a primary school principal stated they've been waiting since October for their lit worker.
I mean, lit workers, they're based at home, but the most of their working time, the absolute majority of work time should be in schools, yes.
Yeah. I keep asking for figures. Is there any figures for breakdown of what much time they spend in schools versus home?
Oh, do have that, but not here. Yes, I can. We can provide in writing to committee.
Thanks. Do you accept in principle that some pupils will always require a classroom assistant by their side, even if it's more expensive? Not saying all, but some.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So our aim is to maximise the outcomes of children, of young people with SEN. If one-to-one classroom assistant is the right way of doing that, they should have a classroom assistant. There's no discussion about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With the reconfiguration of classroom assistants, will we keep a monitoring of any risks around burnout, stress, so that we don't have people leaving the profession?
Absolutely. We already do a fair bit of monitoring of workloads and pressures. We have recently opened up training, and this shows a big need, by the way. So this is a much big piece of work on well-being and health well-being session for Senkos, for example. They were all booked out. We had quite a lot of places. They were all booked out within an hour. There was much higher demand than we expected, so we clearly need to run more of those. So that kind of work is something we take very seriously and we'll continue doing.
Good. Final one. Many of these reforms depend on new structures, LITs, resource hubs, nurture programs. We already have multiple overlapping EA services. What assessment has been done to ensure these models won't duplicate existing provision or create new layers of costs without fixing the underlying problems?
Oh, and that's about. Here it's a very good question. Sorry, do you refer?
No, well, that's about us collaborating to make sure that they don't overlap or duplicate, or in fact pull against one another. So that's why we're working so closely together on every step of SEN reform to take those models forward.
But we're not perfect. We find duplications regularly that we then try to fix. If there are particular things you have in mind, please let us know and we will work with it. Nurture is a good example, which is a program that's working well. We need to incorporate that into the sense that should be SEN support offering. Mm-hmm. So we need to be part of that, of this work as an example.
Yeah, no, it's just there is always these sort of tensions and duplications. No, that's good. Thank you for your clear answers.
You, John, and I think by me failing to pay attention to the notes the clerk was writing down for me, I allowed John to completely gazump Danny, so I'll bring Danny in now.
Always good.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just want to continue on with the classroom assistants. So if you have a classroom assistant now and you have that support, there's no danger of that being removed?
Can I kind of reframe the question, right? Because I'm not trying to be awkward, but I want the child to have the best outcome possible. If a child has classroom assistant now, that must be evaluated all the time, because what is the best need for that child as the child grows and develops? If a child is given a classroom assistant in P1, the need when it comes to year 12 will be quite radically different for most children, because the child has grown and developed. The support offer we give to the child should be based on the evidence of what provides the best outcome for that child to thrive. It's as simple as that. And if the answer is a classroom assistant, then they will keep the classroom assistant.
I could change that and say one of the very much reasons why they need a classroom assistant is because they're being misplaced in the first place. So there's hundreds of children year on year being placed in the wrong settings. Would you accept that?
I wouldn't say wrong setting. I would say that we are not as optimal as we can be. I would be careful with the word wrong, right? They're not in the most optimal setting. I think I would more comfortable language using.
And that's why they could be maybe need that additional support. So someone will come along and say, right, we're just going to take that away because we don't feel like you need that right now.
That's not the purpose of
Because
this.
we can wrap anything up
Yeah,
and say it's the best needs of the child, but then it's really a cut really. To save money.
Hear what I'm saying, but this is not. I mean, I'm not saving money in this. This is to get better outcomes for children. We know of we know many children who need a classroom assistant, right? They should keep classroom assistants. But we also know, and this is reality, that some children who have classroom assistants become dependent on the adult. That's wrong. We want the classroom assistant that they have. When they have
we can get the wraparound support. That's my whole point about the misplacement.
But it is the whole point. We want to change it. We want to change the support is available to the child that the child needs, and therefore the best support for the child is the bigger picture of more stuff, of more adults in general, not necessarily one-to-one. So,
but we know health isn't really at the table. We know children, maybe we'll use your word, optimal placement. So are SPIMs working then?
SPIMs are working well. Sorry. And I kind of again, SPIMs. I want to distinguish two different things, right? There's a concept of a SPIM, and there's practice SPIMs. The concept of SPIMs to have a smaller class setting for children who require a small class setting is right, and for many children they're working very, very well. For some children, SPIMs are not working well, but then we need to find solutions for that. And sometimes that is because a SPIM setting is wrong. Sometimes it's because the support network around the SPIM is wrong. I mean, so
some children would be in a SPIM from P1 to P7. That's not a whole school environment. For concepts out the window.
But for some children, the smaller class size is right because that's what their individual needs are. They should be integrated in the wider school setting, but they should also have the staffing in the SPIM to provide and guide them or support them. Sorry, bad language. Support them to develop and thrive as they are. For some children, it's right to be in a smaller class setting throughout their whole schooling. For some children, it's right for part of their schooling. That depends on the individual need of the child, and that's what we need to respond to. I mean, we have excellent examples of some children who have had very significant needs in the school to do things different currently, where the child has been in essentially a SPIM, even though they called it different things. And the child was helped, supported, and through developing with a really good staff in that school, the child transitioned into a mainstream class and was thriving in academically, and we're doing really well. And that must also exist. It's about finding the right model for the right child. That's different.
I have no doubt there is good examples.
Yeah.
But even in your own briefing papers, you accepted it. You just don't even have the data on reduced timetables. If I just look at the families that come to me, it's in the hundreds. I'm only one MLA in 1 wee constituency, and there's hundreds of children that I know are on reduced timetables, and you just don't even have a grip on it. And that's because they're not placed in the right set, or they're out of school because their classroom assistant, for whatever reason, hasn't been available, or the school can't get a classroom assistant. You talked about flexibility. All due respect, the school leaders are being told they can't spend their own budgets.
But it's exactly.
But I know you're asking for a lot of trust. You're asking us to trust. I personally, I'm sort of a bit tired of hearing the same rhetoric coming back to us, whether it's from the department or it's from the EA. What I'm not feeling in my constituency and talking to parents with children with additional needs is that they are getting the support and that their lives are improving. And we're going to go into another cycle here very, very shortly where children are not going to be placed at the same time as their peers, and we treat children with additional needs completely different from children from mainstream.
And
just final response.
And I know that there's a lot of distrust in the system, and I mean, we talked about this before. I can't do any more than come and be open and honest with you, and I think I have been open and honest with you and said completely the way I see it. I have no reason to hide anything. The reality, if you look at a children with statement of SEND or children with SEND in general, our outcomes are not as good in other jurisdictions. That is black and white. Our model does not replicate a system to do things well. We need to, therefore, I mean, the very obvious solution is then to find a different model that matches what other students do well. And that is about having specialized people, trained people that knows how to deal with specific needs of children. You're saying the issue of SPIMs. I mean, many SPIMs do work very well. I must say that right. For some, the SPIMs do not work. And I mean, I'm the first to accept that as, but if you have the right staff for the children in the schools, the chance of the SPIM working are much higher.
My last point, seeing it around SPIMs, like schools have been promised SPIMs and they're still not even there yet. There's children in centres that are not fit for purpose as a temporary stopgap. We're now moving into the second year of it. I'm sorry, but that's what I mean. I get the concept of what you want to say, and it all sounds great, but the reality on the ground, and that's just when the trust will build. See, and I start seeing the outworkings, and I start seeing improvements, then yeah, I'll gladly say, yeah, brilliant, but it's not happening, and I have more fear this year that we're going to end up in another cycle of parents stressed all the way through the summer.
Have to draw a line at that stage. Michelle, you'd indicated next. Apologies, I hadn't noted that the clerk had taken indications before I did, so my mistake. Entirely
Thanks,
my
folks,
mistake.
for coming in. In terms of this move around the one-to-one support, it had been talked about. We knew that this had to be done sensitively. We knew there would be a lot of concern from parents. There would have to be evidence to support this. So I have a bit of a concern about the communication around this, in the sense that I think the first time a lot of parents were hearing about this as being real was in a consultation on the 5-year budget strategy for education. That speaks of costs and budget savings. That doesn't speak of a child-centred approach. So what can you do to try and rebuild trust that this is really genuinely about the child and not about cost?
So there absolutely needs to be a lot more work done with parents to involve them in the discussion. And so there are plans to do some consultation work where we will talk very specifically to parents to understand what their concerns and challenges are in shaping this model as we move forward. And we're proposing that consultation work will start very shortly. I agree, it's not ideal that it was aligned to the budget statement, and so there is anxiety out there, and we want to address that through proper engagement and proper consultation. There's already some plans in place for starting work with school leaders and special school leaders to begin that engagement very early in March.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I hope good luck with that. It's not going to be easy, and I guess you don't want this to be fraught with a misunderstanding or to create anxiety. There's a lot of people think this is sensible, but again, that was not a sensitive approach to a sensitive topic. Again, in terms of the changes around statement, and this is all linked again to the one-to-one support being linked to kids with the statement. I got an update yesterday actually from a SENCO. She's got 18 years experience, she's very, very experienced, and she said this week was the first time that she had a request for a statutory assessment rejected, and the reason for that was lit team involvement. So I want to ask, if a child is known to the lit teams, will their statutory assessment automatically be turned down? Is that the process now?
No, simple as that. They're not exclusionary processes. If the child if it's SENCO or anyone else for that sake thinks that the child requires a statutory assessment, they should make a referral. Mm-hmm. There's an assessment whether the requirements for a statutory assessment are met, and that is the requirements. That those requirements haven't changed. That they're the same requirements as been in the past about evidence and those things, and the need statement, or the child's needs. During the assessment process, there's an assessment by Ed Sykes and others about what the needs are. That hasn't changed with the starting LITs.
And there's no requirement then for a child to have gone through lit team support before they can go to a statutory assessment?
There's no requirement. For some children, it is obviously appropriate that a less serious intervention is the more appropriate way through. For some children, it's not. There's no requirement to have a lit service before you have a statutory assessment. They're not exclusive in that way.
How do we explain that rejection then, just based on lit team involvement? That doesn't sound like an assessment. That sounds like someone just checked the box.
I obviously can't talk about the individual case because I know nothing about that. Mm-hmm. If you want to speak to me, come to me afterwards. Mm-hmm. We'll look into that, because it's not a tick box in that way. That's just categorically that's not that's why it is.
Again, this is helpful for us to have these conversations, because we find time and time and again the understanding of the process on a page and the understanding of how it's being applied in the real world are rarely or often not aligning.
So this thing, right? my team, my statutory assessment team, do really hard work. It's an incredibly challenging job. They have a huge caseload each. Of course, we get things wrong, right? And I'm not talking about this case, but in general. I mean, things will go wrong. We cannot put our hands up. We will try to fix it when it goes wrong. But we're not perfect. I mean, we have had 860 applications or referrals in the first 5 weeks. We usually get 500 a month, by the way. So it's a massive increase to what you usually get. That's the number. I mean, each of my link officers have 650, 750 cases each. The workload they have is massive. Things go wrong, right? Speak to us. I mean, we can't talk about the individual case here, but speak to us, and we will look at the individual cases. That's what we do all the time. And when we have done wrong, we put our hands up. I mean, and that's, I have no problem saying that.
Feed that back into the system.
Absolutely.
Finally,
Just briefly, yeah.
it is a quick one because I think it is good to have the EA and the department here together, and it's good to hear you talking about that you are working closely together. I'm going to bang a drum I've banged many times before around this support for the LIT teams in terms of resourcing. I asked this question to the department last week, and the answer was the EA haven't asked us for any extra money to support the LIT teams. For me, that was a disappointing answer because I'm not sure that they need to go and ask. It's clear and evident. I put it to the Minister as well that these teams need to be supported. This is where their support on the ground is supposed to happen. And if we're saying perhaps potentially people are not getting statemented unless they go through the LIT teams, then these teams have to be supported. So can someone explain to me why they are not being supported financially, why they're not getting that basic level of resourcing that they need to even attempt to be effective?
So in many ways, I don't know who gave that response.
Response was you haven't put a business case in, so that's why you've got
none of ours here. I can assure you that. I mean, I can get the exact figures, what I spend. This year I'm expecting to spend £690 million. Of that, about 24 is on LITs. My budget for this year is £622 million. Right? So I, in my budget, have a £70 million deficit. Right?
Yeah. I'm asking these guys whether
but the financial position across all of the Ireland in education is not a secret. I mean, these guys.
Other things money are being spent on, and we're told this would be transformational.
Yeah, but this needs new money, right? I mean, the thing is, almost everything we spend is on staff. So we can't stop spend over there to spend it over there, even if that's better because we have the staff over there, right? I mean, that requires other things such as redundancies and all those kind of things, which are whole different processes, which cost money, which we can't do when we have deficits. So it becomes a vicious cycle. What we need to do in transforming the wider SEND work, which we up here are fully in agreement on, is that the overall how we spend the pot of money, first of all, we shouldn't have as black and white lines in the sand between different services. Silo working now is not right for children. There needs to be much more flexibility across the spectrum. And then it's about reprofiling how we spend the money so it meets the needs of the children. Consequently, that means that the LITs will grow and develop naturally. Or what the support service in general will grow and develop naturally. That has to be.
I don't think you're going to convince me.
Draw a line at that stage, but again, other members may wish to pick resourcing up. Cathy, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. And I'm not going to get into with you, Thomas, because we've been through this before, that we've heard that even if the LIT teams were fully resourced, the system just isn't right at the minute, but that's not where I want to go to. Deirdre, I want to go back to your response you made to the Chair around the whole school kind of approach, and you mentioned about behaviour support, therapy support, literacy support, and how the school can support those children in that. I guess what I'm not hearing is how the EA and the department are going to support the school to give that support. And look, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We've seen in the media around the unions, the teaching or head teacher unions, and the industrial dispute. And they do have it in front of me. They cite that SEN safeguarding pressures, including appropriate placements of high-risk vulnerable pupils, inconsistent or unacceptable support from the Education Authority, and school leaders being left accountable for decisions outside of their control. We're now 1 year on from this, and based on what you're saying on paper, and based on what's happening on the ground, and we're now seeing that playing out, is the Minister going in the wrong direction here?
No, I don't think so. Again, we want to look to see what is the best outcomes we can achieve for children. Yes, there has been the letter from the union, and there has been an independent panel appointed which reported in November on the workload pressures of teachers. And that report is being considered, and all of the recommendations being formulated into an action plan which is expected in April of this year, so not far away in terms of taking forward actions out of that workload panel piece of work.
I appreciate that, Deirdre, but can you see the kind of contradiction here when we're talking about all of these different things and how the school can do this and how the school can do that on one hand, and yet we're talking about a workload agreement that hasn't been implemented on the other hand, and I'm not going to take us down another rabbit hole around Transform Ed and the pace and the scale of all those changes as well, and where our school leaders on this. It just seems very focused to me is how are the school going to do that, but less of how is the EA and the department actually going to support the school to do that. Again, I'll say it again, we can see it playing out. And none of us want to be in that space where we're going down the line of school leaders and industrial action and all that there, because it's only our children who are going to suffer at the end of the day. And the Minister says himself, I want to ensure that the direction I'm taking will deliver best outcomes for children and young people with SEN. That's not where we're headed.
Can I give you 4 examples? So, I mean, we can't fix everything at once. I'm talking about SEN alone here. Can I just say that as well? So, first of all, we are finalising his enhanced support package, or whatever we want to call it, for schools that have special education or SPIM. That includes SENCO release, extra admin funding for new SPIMs and retrospective for existing SPIMs. That will come into place this autumn. Right? The details are being finalised as we speak. Secondly, we are doing health and well-being classes for SENCOs. The demand was much, much higher than we expected. So that booked up within an hour, only last week. So I mean, the booking was last week. So we're looking at setting up more of those classes. That is one quite small but yet important thing. When it comes to special schools, so I'm focusing on SEN here, so special schools, there's a particular piece around special school nursing, which is an absolute requirement, which we believe relieves workload and pressures on special schools, because that's one of the things the principals tell me all the time that we need to fix. And the 4th one is, as part of the wider work, which is less specific, that's one putting it last note because it's important, it's part of this enhanced support model. We need to make sure that the teachers in school, principals, don't do basic admin functions. A SENCO has specialist skills for SEN. They should be doing, they should work with children. And it's about then exactly what they will look like, which we haven't got to, but that's part of the enhanced support model. So that's 4 examples, hopefully just very quick, that gives us some assurance that we're working on.
And one thing I will say, I know around the complex medical needs and stuff like that, I will hand it to you. I know that's something that you do have a focus on. But I still, like, if I was a school leader or knowing the school leaders that I do, and they listen to that, they would go, okay, they're tiny things. There is chronic issues right across the system and chronic feelings right across the system that has led them to this point. And I just see a huge contradiction here in trying to load more onto them without the support following it up. None of them are saying we're not up for the task. None of them are saying that they don't want to provide this support for children. Of course they do. But they can't do it on their own, and they can't do it with the pressures that they are currently facing. And nothing that has been said here actually gives me any hope.
So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with you. So that's, I mean, first of all, I'm not saying that with those 4 examples. I mean, the support special provision is not a small package. It's a multi-million-pound package to support his schools. So this is not and it's not a one-off. It's ongoing support. Special nursing. I mean, we have to start somewhere. So we can't do everything at once. This is one particular as we fix. Health and well-being for SENCOs. Again, it's a small thing in itself. But it was more to show that we are really trying to find solutions. And yes, we're starting from a position that's not fantastic. But we can't fix everything at once. We have to go incrementally. We have to do and see what works and what doesn't work. But part of the enhanced support model will be different ways how to support schools. I don't want SENCOs to sit and fill out paperwork or the admin bit of paperwork. That should be done by someone else. I want the SENCO to lead the SEN response to the children, if you see what I'm trying to distinguish. And it's not trust. Will they trust us to do this? Well, I can't force people to trust us. but we are taking it serious and we want to find solutions for that. That's. I mean, I can't.
A comment there from Kathy, and we'll close this one.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, look, I don't know if there's anything more I can say. I don't feel any reassurance, and I don't believe that any school leaders that are watching will feel any reassurance from the department or either. So, but I appreciate your response.
Thank you, Kathy. And David, you indicate.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks for your presentation so far. Look, I think we've seen in the health service in recent years, I think some decisions made that people would agree were probably the right decision, positive decisions about reform, but they were made in the moment of crisis because ultimately that's where it had to get to before people would make those decisions. Danny had said earlier, and I'm not trying to make a party political point, but Danny said earlier that his trust will, his trust will come when he sees it. I think you have to be brave enough to argue for him when you see a system that is broken and needs reformed. But I also acknowledge there's an awful lot of parents will also feel the same way as Danny's articulated, that they'll believe it when they see it. But I think that can be an easier approach to take when you've got a system and you're used to a system and you just want more investment in the same system and hopefully that will work better. Now, you talked that your budget this year is 622 million. I see also from what the presentation you've given us here that on current forecast and assumptions that this will increase to 1.27 billion by 2027-28 if no action is taken to reform the system. Now, my maths isn't great, but that seems to be roughly about half. You currently have about half of what that would be. That kind of, if you had that kind of shortfall in your budget, what does that look like for the system?
Sorry, I think I can just clarify that I think those two different budget figures. So my budget is 622, my spend is 690. My forecast in my particular things, sorry for not being clear enough, is about $1 billion by 2030, just for $1 billion. So it's right. Covering slightly different areas. But fundamentally, if you're sticking with my current budget, with current growth, that means that we will have to drastically cut classroom assistant hours. Yeah. I mean, I reckon it for many children, that means that we have to cut about half. Currently, the new classroom assistant mainstream, we allocate on average around 20 hours per child. If we cut that down to about 10 hours per child in mainstream, I can probably live within budgets. But that's kind of where I would have to go if I would have to live in the budget. But that's also why we're not. That's also why we're not living within budget at the moment. That's why I'm overspending. Yeah. Because we're not willing to make that decision. But that's what it would look like if I had to stick within budgets.
So it's right to say that in future the current system is not sustainable. It's not a case of, I think sometimes it's presented as you're trying to save money rather than look after kids' well-being. Kids' well-being will be worse off in the future if we do not get our accounts right, if we're not able to spend within our limits. And therefore, the reforms are really about making sure that we have as optimal a system as possible for the child, not just about saving money. Is that right?
Well, it's all about having the optimal outcome for child.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, so we not only can we not do it with. I mean, there's three problems. One is the money is said. I mean, that's kind of an underlying thing, but it's not the core reason. It's the outcome of children. I mean, we currently don't deliver the best outcome of children we can. And then, I mean, actually, even with our current model, in some parts we can't recruit classroom assistants. The workforce doesn't exist, and that's really difficult. A large, significant number of part of the workforce is quite transient and fairly. The churn is very high, or turnover is very high.
There's a spectrum of those who are particularly skilled in what they do, and others that have just joined the workforce, which schools say to me at times it is a tick box exercise. They need to provide someone, and someone's available, put them there. Yeah. So I think I think it's a false narrative to suggest that the current system isn't as varied as that for start, or that one-to-one is always the gold standard for every child that gets it. So I think it's important that we make those arguments for reform, and we make it clear that yes, it may be about making sure we can live within our limits, but it's also making sure that we're getting best use of our money to support those kids and get them the best service possible.
You talk about healthcare transmitter. I was in the Department of Health for quite a long time, and the question I asked myself when I went into work every day was, would I want to be a patient in the system? Yeah. Right? I have 3 children. Would I want my children to go through, if they had the statement of SEN or SEN need, to go through the current system here? I mean, the answer is no. Right? And if I don't think that, we need. I mean, how can I live with myself if I don't try to change? Will we get every change we want to do right? Probably not, right? But if we're looking at other models in the world, they do things radically different and get much better outcomes. That's what we need to look at. I mean, I was over in Sweden a few weeks ago. I'm Swedish, as you know, and I visited my junior high school that has 400 kids aged 13 to 16. They have a radically different model and a much better outcomes than we do. Granted, the whole culture is different, the whole system is different, so you can't just transpose. But what they do, they had a very different outcome with the SEND children. The whole concept on how they treat children with SEND is different in the first place. I mean, that school had a special school section of the school. They had a small SPIM-like area and mainstream school in the same building. You don't separate out SEND children because that doesn't make sense. Okay, can we get there now? Well, that's tricky with our infrastructure and culture and all those things. But they're children. We're not treating many SEND children as children. We're treating them as something else, right? They're children, first and foremost, they're children. They have a right to education, have a right to thrive, right to grow and develop. We don't do that. We don't let them that. And that we must change that. I mean, otherwise, how can I live with myself? I mean, how can Craig, how can Deirdre, how can Julie, we can't live with ourselves if we don't try to change this? I mean, questions about what should it be, that we can argue about. But we need to move away from the fact that currently we're not doing it right. We need to accept that. And therefore we must find alternatives. And if our model they're proposing is not what we should do, don't tell us it's wrong. Tell us what we should do instead. Because what we see in international evidence is what we are proposing. Right? If there's other options for that, please bring it on. Right? I'm all up for that. But don't tell us just keep on doing what we're doing, because that doesn't work for our children.
No, I think it's always great. I think to say when you're before us, I think we always see your passion for what you work at. So I think, and that's great. My next question was around evidence anyway. So I think some of those international examples were very useful. And I always thought that was an East Belfast accent, but there we go there.
I mean, so currently in East Belfast for many years, but Swedish, yes.
Okay, thank you, David. So I don't have any other indications. I maybe will just pick the evidence question up, because I think it's really important. It's been cited a number of times across your evidence session that sort of evidence around best practice would show that what we do doesn't deliver best outcomes and that there are better systems out there. Is that sort of material something you can share with committee to help us? Because I mean, we are running an inquiry here. We would like to come forward. Certainly, I would like to say, from my perspective, would like to come forward with recommendations that are constructive.
To produce a paper on all of the evidence that we've reviewed and brief you on that.
So I had intended to have a paper with you on Friday last week, but I spent the weekend in hospital, so I couldn't. Sorry.
Okay, well, I hope you are recovered.
Well, it's my daughter, so it's fine.
Okay. But I think it would be really helpful for the committee to see that, even as a written briefing, as a starting point, to just get a sense of that, because I feel sometimes we're at risk of descending into the anecdotal. It's just well, evidence says okay, and members will say, well, my constituents say different, and where does that really get us? So some of the evidence would be helpful.
And I also wanted to offer too, on the digitised system now, if the committee wanted a demonstration of that, we're happy to organise that to let you see how it works. So happy to organise that.
Just a couple of comments. One on that is that if we have screens, that makes it much easier for us to do the presentation, because it's obviously a digital system. When it comes to evidence, one thing I want to highlight: the proper outcomes evidence for children with SEN is a very long-term piece. I just want to say that it's not quick evidence, because it's really how well do they do it after school that is a proper evidence. So I just want to highlight some of the challenges in having, it's not this child gets, it doesn't work.
Questions, again, it's what we're measuring. I think it's not just
it's not
GCSEs.
Just educational. It's distance travelled
and well-being measures and all of that. So appreciate it's not straightforward, but I just wanted to put the evidence bit out. David referenced it. I think we would welcome some of that material.
Also, Chair, just in that presentation to draw it was in the same section there, the figure, just in case you want to look at it, the 622, and then
we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, look, thank you all for your time, and
wish your daughter all the best, Thomas.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll wrap that session up there. So there's been a request there for maybe some further material. Yes, no, you're absolutely free to go. Around some maybe material around the evidence, and we'll obviously add the evidence taken today, and we'll have the Hansard record for the inquiry. Is there anything else arising from that members want to highlight, Danny?
Yeah. I suppose, Chair, it is refreshing to hear admitting that there is problems in the system, because if we go back to when we first started, back in our committee, there was officials sitting in front of us telling us that they didn't see this coming. And I think that has to be reminded to them as well. Like, I get other countries do it differently, but I'm really worried about the low-hanging fruit sometimes. Like a classroom system is easy to pull at, and you can look at enough evidence to justify taking it away. But if we don't deal with the placements and we don't get the early intervention, which is the great buzzword, right, then all you're going to do is end up with more children on a reduced timetable. And that's reality. And the fact that they don't have a handle on that is really worrying for me. And once they come back with that there, I'd be much more confident. But what I see in my constituency really doesn't correlate with what's being told to us.
Yeah, no, I think it is, and look, we've referenced this so many times. All of this is interconnected, and you can lift one piece out and say, well, we could maybe do something different with that. But then there's other things happening upstream that then, if they're not resolved, it reduces the impact of other things you do. So, look, I think we are all aware of some of the challenges and the complexity.
The difficulty with the reform is that we don't have the money to change everything all at once, and therefore it's done in steps. And as you say, then you end up with bits that haven't necessarily worked into the new system.
With the progress, yeah. It is undoubtedly a complex picture, but I would encourage members to be thinking as well, just along the lines of bringing the inquiry to a conclusion in terms of what those recommendations that we could bring forward are, and I'm always keen to see areas where we believe there's good work being done to support that and to weigh in behind it, but also if there is a concern and a desire around pause on any actions, again, I would encourage members to be thinking about that.
George, and he pointed out stream, the Scandinavian countries are so much more advanced in that integration of children. I mean, you just said it's a special school and a SPIM and then the mainstream, and they're all flourishing together. That is the model I'd love to see for all of our children. It is there.
Regrettably, we're just very far away from it, but yes, absolutely. Okay, members.
We're not going on a trip anymore either.
I know, well, Danny's maybe upset about that. But
did you want to bring us to speed?
I'm always open for those discussions. Okay, members, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8. Can I maybe just suggest a quick comfort break before we move into that, and then we'll go from there.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Members, so that is us back into open session of the committee just after that comfort break. So just wanted to pick up before we move on to the next item. There was an offer from the EA made there for members to get a look at the new digital system for statementing. The EA had previously been in touch around inviting the committee to Academy Street to meet with them there, so I just wanted to check if members are content. I know diaries are under pressure, so we will work around something that does suit everybody. If we're agreed to go back to the EA to accept that offer of a demonstration of their new system, and if there was an opportunity for another engagement with the EA and any other issues, we could pick that up as well if members are agreed. Agreed. Okay. Appreciate that'll be diary permitting, obviously, as we I know things are tight for everybody. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is item 8, and it is some advice that we're receiving from Assembly Legal Services on the legislative competence of the proposed committee bill. So this item will be taken in closed session if members are in agreement with that, as it is legally privileged. Agreed to move into closed session.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.
Okay, members, that's us back into open session, and for benefit of anyone just rejoining the live feed, the committee had a briefing from Legal Services just around some considerations in relation to legal competence and in terms of beginning to shape drafting instructions for the committee bill. No decisions were taken. That work continues in the background. Okay, members, item 9 on the agenda is SL1 in relation to the Special Educational Needs Regulations 2026. So I would refer members to the clerk's briefing note at page 152, some further papers pages 155 to 333 in relation to it, and then in your tabled papers we have the SL1 letter which came through from the department. So I just have a bit of formality to go through here because there is a new process now in place in terms of how committees deal with SL1, so I'll just run through that bit which I have to cover for members' benefit, and then we'll have hopefully a brief conversation on how we deal with this, and I may also just ask the clerk to speak briefly to some of the history of this. So the SL1 in today's pack, it's subject to new process that was introduced on the 5th of January 2026, and we will be looking to seek to reach agreement or a decision on how we operate that process before the consideration of the SL1 takes place formally. So the new process aims to strengthen committee scrutiny of delegated legislation. Departments have been fully briefed in the changes and have been provided with guidance. Departments are now to provide information about proposed statutory rules in a more detailed SL1 template. Departments must also provide drafts of the proposed statutory rule and explanatory memorandum with the SL1 paper, and that will become relevant in our discussion very shortly in relation to the explanatory memorandum. Committees will now call for views on the proposed SR through an online survey. It needs to be clear that that is not intended to be a full public consultation. It's a short 3-question survey that will ask for views on the accuracy and completeness of the proposed rule and whether there are any unintended or unanticipated consequences associated with the proposal. Committees will not formally consider the SL1 until at least 4 weeks after it is submitted by the department, unless there are exceptional circumstances. So ordinarily the process here I think would be that I would just go straight to getting consent from members to go to issuing out that call for views on the SL1, but I just wanted to flag, maybe before we get into any of the detail of this specific statutory rule, is that we don't have an explanatory financial memorandum with this. Now, my understanding is, and perhaps the clerk can clarify this, that the department felt that the SL1, the letter that you have in your packs, was enough to provide that clarity. My view, I want to be really clear on this, is that I don't think that gives us enough. I think this is really significant set of regulations we've got coming through. We have been waiting for this for a decade, and I don't think we should really can't overstate that. This will impact massively when we think about the briefing we had from the department and the EA today in terms of what is the process for a parent or a child seeking a statutory assessment, and then in terms of how that statement is that request is assessed, and how the statement is written, and how the support is put in place, how annual reviews are carried out, how transition planning is done, qualifications required for SENCOs. It is really wide ranging, and really it is one of the most impactful things I think that can drop into the system. So I would be reluctant in terms of putting that out to the public without the explanatory financial memorandum. I think we need something that takes us through regulation by regulation, line by line, what is the practical effect of that. So we can certainly have a wider discussion, but I just want to put it out there. My proposal is that we hold this until we get the briefing from the department next week and clarify if they can give us a timescale on the EFM being provided. Because if we're putting it out to the public, I think they have to be able to understand what these regulations actually do. And the SL1, the letter does give us some clarity on that, but it's quite broad. And from a scan of it myself, there are things that I know that the regulations will do that aren't drawn out in the SL1. So I think we want, we don't want to just rely on what someone may happen to know about the effect of this or not. So that's probably all I want to say on it at this stage. I don't know whether there's anything you want to say specifically to this the draft SR and exactly what it. I mean, you have a memo set out there, but if there's anything you want to add, and then we can bring members in.
Yeah, I think it is long awaited, and the fact that we don't have the explanatory memorandum alongside, and the code of practice is not due until early March, that it just may be a bit more difficult to assess it without that bundle of papers together.
Yeah,
that being the case, I mean, you can explore that. The committee can explore that with officials next week as well. But there is, I suppose, there has been a long discussion of these two pieces of work coming together and needing to come together so that people can understand how the Act will be implemented. Yes, that doesn't sound unreasonable. Do you want me to go into the affirming?
Yes, I think it might be helpful for members to understand in terms of what the sort of what resolution process this will be subject to, just so we understand how this will move through the assembly processes. That would be helpful.
Yeah. So a committee can't amend or adapt a statutory rule. It can make recommendations to the assembly, and in this case, the type of assembly control or procedure is affirmative, and that means that the committee would, in due course, if it were satisfied with the rule, or having dug in and understood the rule and heard a little bit of feedback from stakeholders, would either affirm or not affirm that rule. So the committee takes some evidence, and the new process requires that in response to some of the recommendations of the RHI report, the committee ask specific questions of the public, and that's because in that case there was a kind of people with special knowledge almost who were aware from the very outset that system was flawed, but their information was never picked up until much later on in the process. So this is a proactive way in which the committee puts out a little citizen space to try to get that special information in from users of the system who can identify fault lines or places where it can be improved and made more robust. And in this process, that citizen space will go out for 2 weeks on the Assembly website. That is not to say that the committee can't also engage with its key stakeholders for SEN, some of whom were in the room today, and again, maybe just in an open format, allow them to comment on what they find with the regulations. So the process that's been set up subsequent to RHI means that for a minimum of 4 weeks, the committee scrutinises the SL1 before it should move to a point where it's going to make a decision on the actual regulations. After the committee hears some feedback, be it from the general public or from special stakeholders, the Examiner for Statutory Rules will give the committee an approximation of the human rights impacts of the rule as well. So that will be part of the consideration. So what you would be going to, so after taking advice from the ESR and other people, the question on the statutory rule will eventually be put to the committee, and the committee will have the options to say that either in the case of no objection, that the Committee for Education has considered this SEN Regs rule and recommends that it be affirmed by the Assembly, or in the contrary case, If the committee objects, it would agree that the Committee for Education has considered the SEN Regs rule and recommends that it not be affirmed. And that would then result in a debate. So the Minister would put down a motion to affirm, and the Chair would lead on speaking in response to that. I've tried to ascertain, what the frequency is of departments not listening to an objection like that, but I think it is much more usual that a department will respond to a committee objecting to a rule. So ideally, if there were some kind of objection, the department would go off and take on board the committee's points and factor that into a new rule, which it would then present again. So that's just it differs from primary legislation in the sense that you're not determining every single word, but you can say yea or nay and then have the department redraft in that instance, ideally. So
that's really helpful. I think that there will be a question around the draft code of practice. So these regulations will result in the draft code of practice, which is what schools will use day to day in terms of the EA in terms of managing this process. There'll be a decision to be taken about whether we think we need that as well as the explanatory financial memorandum before going out with a citizen space. I'm open to whatever the committee wants to decide on that, but I would be very clear from my perspective that the EFM is an absolute minimum. So look, happy to hear views on that. So I think Danny had indicated, and then I'll bring David and then Catherine.
Just on the code of practice, I think I agree. I think we really need them. And I know they said we should have it in March, but
I said March, yeah.
Yeah, I think it has to go hand in hand. I'd be more comfortable with that.
David?
More general question, not even really about this as the general processes that have come in. When you say the committee then has to give scrutiny for a period of 4 weeks, is that just a timeline of 4 weeks, or is that 4 weeks of committee? The sessions should be focused on that. What does that mean exactly?
A minimum, it just means that you kind of have a marker when the committee first looks at the
scrutiny period. It was a certain period it imposes.
Is a minimum.
It's not dictating how much scrutiny it needs to be given.
No, so the minimum is 2 weeks citizen space with 3 questions, which are generic and apply to every single SL1 that comes in, and it's just to try to strengthen scrutiny of delegated legislation.
And I'm not questioning that, just interested in sort of what that means.
We don't have to run evidence sessions for the whole 4 weeks or anything like that, but it's the window.
Whatever it is.
Proportionate.
I suppose as well, Cathy, I'll bring you in a wee second. I would just want to emphasise as well that this is likely to be a substantial piece of work. I think we sometimes think, it's a statutory rule, it's a kind of nodded through, but I really do want this to be on the record in public session. This will make it will have an impact what we do with this, so it is important that we get this right. So I know there's an appetite for the department to bring this in for September 26, and if we can work with them to facilitate that, then that is absolutely no issue with that. But I don't think we should be rushed into making a decision without hearing all the evidence. And so I'll just bring Cathy in first.
Just briefly, because Danny more or less said it, you hit the nail on the head there. It's the impact that these are going to have is huge, and I feel there's a process and the department's not following that process by not giving us this information. We've been asked before to put blind faith on things, and we've done it, and it hasn't worked out well for us. So I'm definitely not comfortable in moving anything forward until we get more information on that.
Well, look, beginning of March is not far away, so look, if the draft code of practice is available by then, that may be appropriate to pause until then. But I'll get obviously consensus from committee on that before we do anything with it. We do have the department in giving us evidence, so we can explore all of these issues around timelines and what they do plan to share and all of that. Don't think with John or Cara on there. I'll just check, Michelle, have you anything to add to this at this stage? No? And then Danny?
I just think, just for the record, I appreciate they want it for September 27, but they've been asked for many years in here now. I've asked the Minister, and I was told back in March of 24 that to be imminent, and then it would be just before autumn and Christmas and all that. So I just think it's only to be fair that they can't come saying, you're holding us back.
No, I think, we all know how long the system has
Yeah,
waited
I
for
know.
these to land, and
I
we
know.
are into the sort of territory of a decade, so it is just that, I wouldn't want to be rushed. If the department can set out a clear reason why this September is really important in terms of other interventions that they're bringing and that they need this to come, I'm happy to hear the evidence, and I would want to be reasonable with them, but I don't think we should be bounced into anything on this.
100%.
Okay. So can I just check then we have agreement that we will pause on going out to the citizen space at this stage, and we will review then our next steps following the evidence from the department next week. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. It might be helpful in the interim for the clerk to reach out to the department to set out the things that the committee's keen to see, the EFM and the draft code of practice, and to get maybe clear timescales so that they're coming to the briefing with clarity on that next week as far as possible. That would be helpful. Okay, so that takes us on to correspondence. Item 10 on the agenda, that's at pages 374 to 439, and then we also have some items in a couple of additional items in tabled papers. And there's a summary note, page 374 of your pack. So as usual, I'll just run through anything that needs committee discussion or decision other than that summary note. Item 10.3, page 384, response from the GTCNI and teacher registration. I'm just content to add this to the papers for the committee stage of the bill. Are we agreed? Item 10.4, page 387, it's a response from the Minister of Education on funding for Irish medium education. Happy to invite members' views. I'd be content to note at this stage unless anyone wants to add anything. Agreed to note. Item 10.5, page 389, correspondence from the NASUWT union on the right to choose trousers bill. They may have landed on a title for our bill in how they framed it. Again, our members, and just to note that it was a very short response confirming full support for the intentions of the bill. Our members content to add that to the bill papers. We agreed. Item 10.6, page 390, it's correspondence from the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People on the Minister's response provided to committee on the recently altered transgender guidance. Can I seek members' views on that? I mean, I have a sense that there's not likely to be any movement on this from the Minister, and I'm not sure how far correspondence back and forward will get us, but if there are actions arise, I'm very happy to discuss them. I would propose we note at this stage. Note. Item 10.7, page 393, it's a letter from the Department on the Regulation of Private Tutors. This is correspondence that has been back and forward for a while now. So the letter sets out that there is no intervention in terms of regulation of private tutors proposed at this time, but they, following the recent agreement, there was a cross-departmental safeguarding meeting that took place, and it was agreed that they were going to make contact with other jurisdictions to establish their approach on the issue and the regulatory framework to see if there's anything Northern Ireland could adopt. I would want to propose we share that with the individual who initially engaged with us on this, and also write back to the department to request that the committee be kept updated with that ongoing work in relation to other jurisdictions if we're agreed. Agreed. Item 10.9, page 398, is submission from the Women's Regional Consortium on the right to choose trousers. Are we content to add that to the bill papers? Agreed. Item 10.10, page 408, submission on the GTCNI bill. Again, are we content to add that to bill papers? Agreed. Item 10.11, page 411, is correspondence from the Committee for Finance on their review of arm's length bodies. I would propose we note nothing in there that's new, I don't think. Item 10.12, page 433, it's correspondence from the Committee for Finance on the Administrative and Financial Provisions bill. This relates to the clause in the bill that covers the Department of Education providing funding for the educational psychology course. The update that we've received in that correspondence is that the Committee for Finance is not hearing evidence from the department on this, and that they are likely to endorse the clause as drafted, and that appeared to be the view from members in this committee as well. So are we content to note, or does anyone have any concerns they want to highlight on that? No, agreed. Item 10.13, page 434, it's a submission from the Commissioner for Public Appointments regarding the GTCNI bill, effectively confirming that they're not able to provide any view on whether it's an appropriate process for GTC or not. They will only deal with public appointments processes, that are live and in the system. Are we content to add that to the committee papers? Great. And then we've also got item 10.14 on page 439. It's a response from the EA on the collection of data on pupils with rare diseases. EA have confirmed that DE is responsible for issuing guidance around the recording of pupils with medical needs, and that any changes to the register and the guidance would need to be considered by them on that basis. Are we happy to seek a response from the department on this issue and update the Rare Diseases Partnership, who had highlighted that with us, if we're agreed? Item 10.16 at page 35 of tabled papers is a letter from the Tiny Life charity, and this was tabled quite late, but they are highlighting it as an urgent funding concern, so it's appropriate to raise with members. So they explain that the funding that they receive as a charity, and Tiny Life will be aware, obviously, a charity working with parents and children of parents of children who were born prematurely. They are highlighting that they received funding since October 22 as an outworking of the Fair Start report from the Department of Education, but they have no certainty of where their funding will land after the end of March. They are seeking a meeting with committee. I know we were quite clear in previous discussions that we wanted to limit informal briefings. I would want to suggest this is one I do feel is appropriate. I think it's a charity that they've set out quite clearly in their correspondence that the impact their work has, and I think, as we've discussed at length in relation to special educational needs, the need for early intervention, and often this cohort of children fall into that category. And I would also want to suggest we write to the Minister to seek any clarity he can provide on their ongoing funding future. I don't know if any members have anything they want to add, or if we're agreed. Agreed. Okay. Other than that, are we content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note? Great. That takes us to item 11, which is the Forward Work Programme. I would refer members to page 441 of your packs. I don't think there's been a huge amount of change. It's progressing as we would expect, I think, in terms of
just
that.
I think I mentioned earlier that the youth services, update will be on the 18th of March. Yes.
Are we content to endorse?
Ask,
yes, certainly.
In terms of, I think I'm wondering, I haven't missed the appropriate opportunity, because every week there's something I'm sort of thinking that maybe it's not the right person to ask. I had mentioned probably a month or two ago about the issues around sort of school meal provision for people who would refuse certain types of food and so on. And there was talk that someone was going to come as part of a panel that might be able to speak to that.
I'll chase that up.
I just think it would be an angle that might be worth including within our inquiry in that regard.
Yeah.
You can pick up the.
Yeah, I did engage, and I'll chase it up. Thank you.
Okay. Other than that, are we content to endorse the draft Forward Work Programme? Agreed. Item 12 was any other business. Is there any other business? Nope. Something from yourself.
There was something came in. The consultation on exams has reported, so I can circulate it to you after. But it just basically came in before the meeting.
Could make interesting reading. So we will see. So that's grand. So item 12, then any other business. We can move on to item 13, which is the date, time and place of the next meeting. So that's scheduled for Wednesday the 25th of February at 2 p.m. in room 29 and online. And just leaves me to put the question: the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.